Fall of Yummy Extra Round Part 2. Show me how really outraged you are, Pan declared with a smug smile as she flared her power. Lind narrowed her eyes as she appraised her opponent and prepared herself for battle, before disappearing from all sight in less than a blink. The people watching were left dumbfounded, wondering where she had gone, when Pan suddenly raised her left arm up to block an overhead strike from Lind. The impact from that parry released such a thunderous shockwave that spread throughout the entire remains of the construction field and rattled the whole place up as it created a massive 15 meters in diameter crater. All the fighters and minions of the alien girl had to brace themselves in order to resist the impressive shockwave that was physically pushing against them. It was as if a ballistic missile had struck the field in full. Keiichi was forced to get down on his knees in order to cover Belldandy and himself against the immense pressure waves released by that impact. And even then he also had to be helped by Erd, who got in front of him with Skuld in her arms as she used her own body to protect him and both of her sisters as she turned her back to the raging battle. Both combatants at the center of the field simply ignored the destruction brought about by their clash and continued with their fight. Lind tossing a barrage of thousands of punches at the speed of light while Pan, easily and gracefully, blocked every single one of them without any apparent effort. Even though the alien girl had to give some ground and was forced to fly around the place in order to block the attacks of the white-clad goddess that was chasing her all around, not even one of Lind's punches was able to break through her defenses. As they kept trading blows, Pan seemed to underestimate her opponent's skill, as she started to block with only her left arm while the other she set it behind her back. This action made Lind grow increasingly irate as she believed the alien girl to be mocking her. Yet even with one arm she was still blocking all of her attacks with ease. It came a moment where the blue-haired goddess simply had enough and struck again with all her might with a single focused punch. Pan actually flinched a little when she caught the attack with her hand, the impact creating another shockwave, but this one being focused in a single direction this time, as it bypassed the limb of the alien girl and continued on its way in a straight line as a visible pressure wave of great diameter that carved a trail mark on the ground to mark its passing. The moving stream of kinetic energy headed straight towards the direction of the gathered fighters, who had to jump out of the way in order to avoid the pressure wave that destroyed anything standing on its way and ended up smashing into yet another building and completely demolished its external facade. Pan just glanced towards her scurrying followers and knew it was time to move the fight to another place. She turned towards Lind. "Let's take this to the sky," she said placidly with a smile, before she smashed her knee right in the goddess' stomach and blasted her into the air towards the roofs of the skyscrapers. The alien girl then proceeded to go after her opponent. The teenage Saiyan intercepted her flying adversary with a kick in midair and punted her right into the sea over Tokyo Bay several miles into the ocean. Pan flew once more towards her opponent at light speed, but Lind had already recovered and met her attack with one of her own, both women clashing with a powerful impact on the skies above the waters of the bay. The shockwave of such confrontation releasing a massive sphere of displaced air that spread throughout the entire bay, visibly disturbing the waters of the sea as the entire waterfront rattled briefly as it felt the strength of that impact even at such distance. The eardrum-bursting thunderclap of such clash was able to be easily heard throughout the entire metropolis of Tokyo, startling pretty much the entire population of the Japanese capital. It was not going to be the only impact of such magnitude that would be felt in the next couple of minutes, as both opponents kept clashing against each other with earth-shattering strength. Even though the little Giru cameras were still filming the battle, the speed at which both combatants were moving was so high, that none of the people watching the fight, not even the Grandmasters, were able to see a thing. All that could only be seen was the tremendous shockwaves that were created by their punches that peppered the sky over the sea beyond the bay, causing slight tremors that could be felt through all of Tokyo and deafening thunderclaps that reminded of aerial strikes with ballistic missiles, which made everybody feel as if they were in a war zone. The rain of shockwaves could be seen for miles around. Finally, after several long terrifying moments, the two combatants became visible again as their punches smashed against each other with one powerful detonation. Pan was enveloped in a radiant golden aura as electricity could be seen running between the strands of her spiky golden hair. Lind, however, was displaying her magnificent wings in full once more as she too was enveloped by an electrifying blue aura. Both opponents then began to trade blows again, this time with an increased viciousness, as Lind began to launch her punches much faster and violently. It was in that moment that Pan decided it was a good time to start making use of energy blasts. The alien girl ducked under a punch from the blue-haired goddess, before she disappeared from all sight in a burst of speed. Lynn seemed caught off guard for a moment, before she turned to look up to see Pan appearing above her before she began to lob energy projectiles at her. "H-A-A-A-A-A." The alien girl yelled as she began to bombard her opponent with a veritable rain of thick balls of energy the size of a basketball. Lynn was forced to dodge by performing sharp evasive maneuvers in the air to avoid getting struck, the projectiles impacting on the water and detonating with the force of powerful deep charges that released immense pillars of water of at least 30 meters of height into the sky due to the force of their explosions. Lynn dived towards the water, avoiding the projectiles brushing past all around her as she waded between the great pillars of water produced by their detonations, Pan hot on her heels as she kept launching energy blasts at her. Lynn flew frantically as fast as she could just above the water edge, veering side to side to avoid the energy projectiles that were still raining down on her. As she kept evading all attacks, Lynn cupped her hands over her heart and began to recite a chant for another spell in a hurry. Her casting didn't take long as her spell in mind wasn't a particular powerful one, she only needed it to get Pan off her tail for a moment. Once she was done, she quickly tossed the orb of mana between her hands into the sea as she spun around in the air to avoid another energy projectile. The sphere of magical energy quickly sank into the bottoms of the sea and was lost from all sight, while the two women kept chasing each other in their little game of cat and mouse with explosive balls. However, very soon the effects of Lynn's spell began to make themselves known, as long and sharp stakes of ice suddenly began to appear from among the waters of the sea in front of Pan's flight path with the intention of skewering her alive as they froze all liquid around them in an 1-meter diameter. The sudden attack coming from below caught the alien girl off guard for a moment, but despite her surprise she was able to evade the spikes of ice and remain on her course, only for more frozen stakes to start popping from underneath the waters and trying to turn her into a pincushion. Pan just sneered in annoyance at the incoming projectiles and simply swatted aside the first ice stake that tried to impale her, breaking the frozen construct in two with a single swing of her arm. It wasn't as good of an idea as she had first thought. "Ah, damn it, it's cold," Pan said, rubbing her arm briefly in vexation, as the sudden sharp drop of temperature had certainly been uncomfortable. Not dangerous in any sense of the word, as it would require more than a simple change of temperature to kill a Saiyan, but it was enough to be a real pain in the ass. Not looking forward to keep touching, or being touched, by those ice spikes, Pan began to perform her own evasive maneuvers in order to avoid every single one of the frozen stakes that began to appear wherever she flew by. Soon there was a long trail of ice in the middle of the bay filled with those frozen needles as Pan became totally focused in weathering the effects of Lynn's spell. The blue-haired goddess took this small reprieve as a perfect opportunity to chant a more powerful spell. Lynn began to gather mana over her head as she sang her incantation, energy dancing and revolving around her. It was in that moment when she began to hear the melodic tones of Lynn's voice that Pan remembered that she should have been looking for the goddess instead of being avoiding the frozen needles, and taking into consideration how annoying the ice spikes were being, she was certain it would be too much of a hassle if she were to let her finish whatever spell she was chanting. Pan veered upwards in order to search for Lynn from a higher vantage point, even though the ice spikes kept chasing after her as they became increasingly longer in order to compensate for her higher altitude. The alien girl started to grow truly irate at the frozen stakes that didn't seem to want to leave her alone for even a second, so she began to make use of her energy blasts again to blow any ice needle that dared to get close out of her way. While Pan was occupied dealing with this newest hindrance, Lynn managed to finish her spell. Displaying a great concentration of magical energy that caused her to glow in a vibrant blue aura, Lynn raised her hands up to the sky, calling forth the help of the primal energies of the earth. What answered her summons was a massive fist constructed entirely of ice that appeared from within the depths of the sea surrounding Tokyo Bay. The fist bursted forth with a great displacement of water right underneath Pan's position. The alien girl just had time to look down and be marveled by Lynn's magical ability to be able to summon such giant construct, before the fist struck her in full and punched her upwards. Just as she began to soar towards the sky, the fist opened up and caught her before closing up again around her, leaving her trapped. Only her head was left visible as her entire body was surrounded by the construct of ice, a predicament that proved really inconvenient for Pan. Brr, it's too cold. I hate cold, she said while shivering greatly because of the low temperature. A shadow suddenly fell over her. Pan looked up in time to see Lind falling towards her with both feet stretched forward in a dropkick. The white-clad goddess smashed right on the face of the alien girl with powerful force, cracking the upper part of the frozen construct with a shower of hundreds of chunks of ice that made it seem as diamonds were raining from the sky, while pushing the alien girl deeper into the ice construct, burying her inside tons of ice. Believing she had finally made some ground into defeating her enemy, Lind pushed herself back into the sky with a flutter of her wings in order to appreciate her own handiwork. For a moment, there didn't seem to be any kind of sign of the alien girl, but then a great tremor began to be felt all around the bay, with the giant mound of ice as its epicenter. Suddenly, with a great shout and display of power, Pan broke out from her icy prison as she flared her ki, which burned in a golden fiery aura that sent thousands of sharp pieces of ice flying everywhere. Ha! Lind was forced to brace herself against the sudden storm of flying frozen shrapnel, small and shimmering fragments of ice that shone under the light of the sun like tiny little diamonds, but cut deep with the sharpness of a razor. The goddess had to cover herself by crossing both arms and wings in front of her to avoid getting turned into a bleeding mess, the tiny cutting pieces of ice peppering and smashing against her defenses. Once the shower of shining cutting projectiles came to an end, Lind uncovered herself to start looking for her opponent again, only to be unable to find any trace from the alien girl anywhere. The white-clad goddess searched around her surroundings for a moment with a look of puzzlement, only to suddenly open her eyes wide in surprise as she realized that Pan had appeared behind her out of nowhere with both palms open and crossed over her head. Exclamation mark. Misenko. The young Saiyan yelled as she fired a concentrated beam of energy from her crossed hands that struck Lind on her back in full. The energy beam simply swept away the blue-haired goddess and rammed her into whatever was left of her ice construct before detonating with a thunderous explosion. Pan simply floated above the conflagration with a nonchalant attitude as she oversaw her own handiwork. "That is for having freezed my ass and annoyed me," the alien girl simply said with a hint of disdain. Back on the desolated remains of the broken construction site, all that loud hammering and deafening detonations were enough to wake up Belldandy from her state of unconsciousness. "Wah! What happened, Keiichi?" the kind and gentle goddess said as she fluttered her eyelids open, only to find the face of her beloved staring down at her, catching her completely by surprise. "Hey, Belle, glad to see you're finally awake," the young man said with a kind smile. The Norn of the present was a bit confused for waking up between the arms of her paramour, but she quickly worked through her haze and began to take stock of her situation. "Wah Keiichi, what are you doing here? Where are Erd and Skuld? What happened to Lind and Pan? Wham! And what is that noise?" the brunette goddess asked with a frown marrying her beautiful face as she turned her head towards the direction of the loud impact that had disturbed her. Her somewhat boyfriend limited himself to answer her questions one by one. "Well, Belle, let's see, did you really think I would simply stand by with my arms crossed while you and your sisters ran off to fight an alien supergirl from another world? Seriously, after all we've been through, you really expected that I would let you go off without me?" Keiichi said with a plain stare. The goddess of the present had the decency of blushing after all that tirade from her pseudo-boyfriend, but she recovered pretty quickly. "I guess not," she said looking away, before her expression softened and she turned back to Keiichi with a smile. "But I am glad you're here with me, nevertheless," she said, beaming a happy serene face. Now it was Keiichi's turn to blush, as goofy grin adorned his face and he scratched the side of his cheek with a finger. Fake cough. "Well, anyway, to answer your second question, your sisters are okay, just look over there if you want to see them for yourself," the young mechanic said, getting back on track as he pointed with a finger towards the direction of Belldandy's siblings. "Pan roughened them up a little, but other than that they are pretty much fine." Belldandy looked towards the direction Keiichi was pointing at and saw Erd sitting on the bench of a bus stop at the side of the street looking pretty beat up, with Skuld resting on her lap. The child goddess seemed to have been unconscious just like her too, as she saw her waking up with great discomfort and lifting herself to a sitting position while still on Erd's lap, a hand pressing tightly on her forehead as if she were suffering of a terrible headache. "Oh, my poor head, What happened? Skuld asked as she clutched her head in pain. Easy there, Squirt. You got a nasty bump on your head, courtesy of that Pan girl. Erd said uncharacteristically kindly towards her younger sibling. Erd's statement seemed to have broken Skuld's confusion as the eyes of the little girl suddenly widened in realization. The Pan girl. Sister. Where is big sister? She exclaimed with a look of mild panic as she began to glance at her surroundings frantically in search of Belldandy. Hey, calm down, Squirt. Everything is fine. If you're asking about Belldandy, Keiichi over there appeared and managed to convince Pan on letting you and her go. You should have seen him. He was so brave as he stood in front of Pan and met her gaze and refused to back down until he forced her to release both you and Belldandy, despite the fact that that girl could have killed him any time she wanted. He actually managed to impress her very much. Erd said, trying to calm down her younger sister as she pointed in the direction of the young man. Skuld turned to stare at her sister and her savior, and squinted her eyes, not entirely pleased with that development. Of course it HSD to be that baka. And he's getting the opportunity to get all fresh with big sister, I bet. Ah, fine, I'm willing to forgive him just this time, because he saved us from that mean alien girl, Skuld declared with a pout as she crossed herself in arms. Erd just let out an amused huff and patted the head of her annoying little sibling. Belldandy just smiled seeing the antics of her sisters and because of the fact they were in good health, so she turned back to her paramour. You were right, Keiichi, they are okay. But I don't see neither Pan nor Lind anywhere, so where are they? She asked with a perplexed look after glancing briefly around at the place. Keiichi just rubbed the back of his head with an embarrassed expression. Well, that is tied to the reason of all this noise you're hearing. Those two are currently fighting again while flying over Tokyo Bay. Those loud impacts you're hearing are actually the sound of their punches carrying all the way here. Belldandy was immediately alarmed by that response. We have to stop them. She exclaimed and tried to break from her boyfriend's embrace in order to be able to stand up again. Keiichi was understandably pretty against that idea. Hey, wait a minute, Belle. Calm down. There's nothing that can be done at this point. If you try to intervene again, you'd be simply getting in the way, and I don't think I could convince Pan from hurting you a second time. Not to mention this time my own head will be at risk since I gave her my word that you and your sisters would not intervene in her fight with Lind once you all regained consciousness. He explained as he struggled to keep the brunette goddess from doing something stupid. Belldandy just turned towards him with big blue vibrant pleading eyes. Oh God, he just could not resist that stare. But Keiichi, we cannot simply let them fight as they please. In order to have a chance against such a powerful opponent like Pan, Lind would have to release all of her limiters and use her entire power against her. If she does that, then this world is doomed. You know pretty well that we goddesses can destroy the whole planet with just the power of our auras. Don't you remember when Erd was possessed by the Lord of Terror? She was about to destroy the entire Earth just by flaring up her power before we stopped her. The Norn of the present exclaimed with a desperate tone, trying to convince her boyfriend of letting them go. Keiichi almost caved under the big puppy eyes of his beloved. Really, he just couldn't stand seeing Belldandy sad. But goddammit, he had to put his foot down on this issue. The continual well-being of Belldandy and her sisters depended on him making sure they didn't interfere with the alien girl fight anymore. So as much as it pained him, he had to go against the wishes of the woman he loved. I'm sorry, Belldandy, but there's nothing that can be done. All we can do now is trust in our friend and hope she will be able to keep things from escalating. I'm pretty sure Lind would not allow her battle to endanger the world if she can avoid it. We must have faith in her. Keiichi said with all the kindness he could muster as he stared the goddess in the eyes. A feeling of apprehension began to swell in Belldandy's heart. She understood the words of his beloved, but she couldn't honestly feel that kind of trust for Lind. Ashamed of herself, she refused to meet Keiichi's eyes. I understand what you're trying to say, Keiichi. I wish I could have faith in Lind's capacity to restrain herself, but I can't. You don't know her as well as I do. If a battle proves a good enough challenge for her skills and starts overextending for a long period of time, then the more it takes for that battle to end, the more will Lind start to lose herself in the fight and fall prey to her own battle lust. Ridding her mind from all other concerns outside her fight and ignoring everything else but achieving victory no matter the cost. So you see why I can't rest easy. It's not that I don't wish to trust in my friend, but I know she will lose her self-control at any moment if we don't do something. No question about that, the goddess exclaimed in alarm, turning to look back at her paramour with extreme worry etched on her face. Keiichi was astonished by what Belldandy was telling to him. What she was saying was very worrisome, but despite that he still wanted to keep his faith on his friends. I do not want to believe what you're saying is true, Belldandy. Lind may tend to let her love for battle get the best of her most of the time, but I wish to believe in my friends no matter what. So yes, maybe Lind will start to lose most of her inhibitions the more her battle lasts, but I have faith she will be able to keep her urges in check, he said with the utmost determination carved on his face. The moment he finished his little speech was the moment that hell literally broke loose, as a massive ball of fire the size of the whole center of Tokyo was shot into the sky, rising high among the clouds before detonating with such a tremendous force that all the people living in all the districts of the Japanese capital could feel the ground underneath them shake. The explosion of such powerful fiery projectile was enough to set the whole sky alight as flames completely covered the heavens, erasing all blue in its totality and replacing it for a burning red. A firestorm began to rage furiously, and soon enough, a literal rain of fire began to fall from the sky, burning projectiles that smashed indiscriminately upon the helpless metropolis below, striking the top of skyscrapers or detonating in the middle of quickly deserted streets, as the people dwelling in the Japanese capital were not stupid to remain still on their places instead of seeking shelter against the rain of fire. All those drills made in case of earthquake or natural disaster proving to be quite the lifesaver. A literal inferno assailing and spreading throughout all of Tokyo, creating an image that seemed to have come straight out of hell. Keiichi could only simply stare at the burning skies in shock, wondering to his insides if maybe he had made a huge mistake in putting all his trust in Lind. He and the three goddesses' sisters were unable to do anything but stare at the raging inferno that rained down over their heads. The fighters that still remained in the destroyed construction site were too unable to do anything but gape gobsmacked in shock at the rain of fire falling from the sky and bombarding all of Tokyo. It was as if the Judgment Day had finally arrived to punish mankind for its sins. My God, I never thought I'd live to see the day when the apocalypse would finally be unleashed upon the world. There are no words to express what I am feeling right now, Mature said with a look of complete awe as she stared up at the raging firestorm. From her position as she was being supported by Alexander Gaidar, Nina Williams simply commented without taking her own gaze from the burning sky. How appropriate for you to say that, because it is a real goddess who has brought forth the end of days upon us, she said with an unnatural coldness and calmness despite the extremely alarming situation. What are we supposed to do against something like this? Vice asked with heavy concern at Mature's side as she turned her head to look at Nina. Her answer was simply an unconcerned shrug from the currently wounded blonde assassin. What else can we do but trust that our new boss is strong enough to deal with this situation on her own? I for one think her odds of winning this are pretty good, so I see no reason to despair. And even if somehow she is defeated, I do not intend to be dying in here this day, apocalypse or not. She said with such a nonchalant attitude despite her injured state. The most impressive of all was that she spoke with such a certainty and confidence in her voice that none of the fighters gathered in the remains of constructed field, be it Yami Grandmaster, Pan follower, Yomi apprentice, or Nanto or Hokuto user, doubted she would be able to walk from this place alive regardless if the end of the world did came to pass. Nina's unyielding character was enough to reassure the rest of the fighters and settle most of their worries. You're right, I was getting all worked up for nothing. Let us simply continue watching Pan's fight, Vice said, getting her attention back towards the alien girl. In Kanto, and practically the rest of the world, the gathered students could only stare jaw-slacked with stunned expressions at the images of the raining inferno that had suddenly been unleashed upon the skies of Tokyo. The shock they all felt for seeing something that has only been spoken of in the pages of the Bible was too terrible to describe. Everybody just stared. The Ryazanpaku Masters, the Shinpaku Alliance, the Kanto schools and the other mysterious individuals that were watching from a nearby rooftop. None found any amusement in the situation that was developing in Tokyo right now. By Kami, was all that Kenichi could say, too shocked for any further words. At his side, Mew could simply dumbly nod with an expression of frozen horror on her face. In another city around Kanto, one known as the center of all martial arts in the country if not the world, inside an abandoned building whose interior had been refurbished to become the secret hideout of a group of friends of which many high-level female martial artists were part of, the little gang of friends known locally as the Kazama family was watching the live feed with looks of stricken horror etched on their faces. Well, all of them except one buxom drop-dead gorgeous ruby-eyed ebony long-haired girl. Finally, someone has appeared strong enough to help me get rid of my boredom. The beautiful woman said with a smirk as she stared at the flat LCD screen with a look of utter ecstasy. Momoyo Kawakami had her sights now set on Tokyo. A couple of minutes ago, after Pan had struck Lind with her Masenko. This is not enough, I need more power. Lind thought as she floated underwater among broken pieces of ice. She then brought her hands over her heart in some sort of prayer as she began to channelize more magical energy. A deep glow began to shine under the waters of Tokyo Bay as it slowly began to spread until an unearthly shimmering ball seemed to have extended under the entire sea of the bay. Pan easily took notice of the glow and began to prepare for the attack that was surely about to come. Just as soon as the alien girl braced herself, did Lind appeared blasting from underneath the sea, her wings completely spread once more as they shone with a blindly white light. Lind herself emanating a supernatural glow through her entire body, she stopped right in front of Pan on where she was floating in the air and stretched her wings wide as she continued to glow. Her wings seemed to lengthen for a moment and appeared to change form, but they ended up showing the shapes of two little and cute blonde white-winged angels with blue and red eyes that were attached to Lind's back, revealing that her wings were in reality those of these two angels that seemed to be bonded to her. And the angels were female by the look of things, as their budding breasts covered by a white cloth could attest to. Such unexpected development was enough to surprise even Pan for a moment. What? Your wings were actually angels bonded to you all this time? How the heck? Pan asked with a flabbergasted expression. Correct. Lind simply replied. Meet Cool Mint and Spearmint, my most trusted companions, she said, gesturing to the blue-eyed and red-eyed angel respectively. All goddesses are paired with an angel to help and aid them in the casting of more powerful and complex spells, as well as being companions to the goddesses. They are a reflection of a goddess' true nature and of the innermost thoughts and feelings of her soul. So to fight me, it also means to fight my two little companions here, for we are three bodies that share one heart. The white-clad goddess said as she took a focused fighting stance, the little angels behind her mimicking her motions perfectly and in tandem with her. Pan's only reaction was to raise an eyebrow in curiosity. You know, any other person may consider it a little unfair having to fight against three opponents at the same time instead of one. The corner of her mouth then rose up in a small smirk. Luckily for you, I'm not most people. To me this little revelation simply makes things even more interesting. Lind kept her eyes entirely focused in her opponent as she replied. Do not worry about that issue. I am still the only opponent you have to watch for. My angels simply support me in my spellcasting and allow me to more easily have access to my full reserves of power. A curious expression then formed in Pan's face. Oh, well, let's see it then. Show me your true power, she said with an amused smile. That is all Pan was able to say before a fist impacted on the right side of her head, sampling her entire body to a side. The alien girl quickly retaliated with an uppercut that the blue-haired goddess blocked with one arm, a mighty shockwave being released from the impact. Lind then countered with a knee into Pan's stomach that lifted the smaller girl up to the goddess eye level, who didn't waste the chance to strike the Saiyan girl's back with an overhead double axe handle that blasted Pan straight towards the sea. However, before she was able to strike the waters, the alien girl was intercepted with a kick from Lind that sent her spiraling back towards the sky. Pan was immediately able to right herself up and stop in midair. A fierce smile on her face as bit blood stained the corner of her mouth. Not bad, now this fight might actually prove a fun challenge to me, she said as she cleaned the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand, before she disappeared from all sight only to appear again as she landed an uppercut right underneath Lind's chin, snapping the head of the blue-haired goddess back. The white-clad beauty was disoriented for a moment due to the sudden impact, giving more than enough time for Pan to sink her fist into the goddess' abdomen with enough strength as to make her retch a wad of saliva. The second strike snapped Lind out of her funk and made her furious towards the alien girl, causing her to snap back her attention unto her just in time for the blue-haired goddess to block another punch aimed towards her face. Lind then retaliated by grabbing Pan by the head and janking her abruptly forward to smash her knee right into the alien girl's nose, blasting her away from her in the process to give Lind some breathing space. The goddess took the opportunity to focus her strength. "I need more power," she said as she began to channelize more of her power, the dots on her forehead glowing with a piercing blue light as her angels behind her seemed to be drawing more and more magical energies through prayers. Lind then turned to look at the alien girl flying back towards her. She did nothing but patiently wait for her with a focused gaze as blue electrical sparks danced between her fingers. If Pan hadn't painfully been drilled into her head the value of patience to counteract her hot-headed Saiyan temper, she would have snapped irately towards Lind and launched herself at her with wild abandon. As it is, seeing how she was waiting for her with a focused gaze, made her reconsider her approach and be more mindful of her step, suspecting the blue-haired goddess of having something in store for her. Pan got in front of Lind and assumed a fighting stance while still floating among the clouds of Tokyo Bay. "You seem to be getting more and more powerful as time passes by. Still, that is yet not enough to defeat me. Care to try again?" she said in an attempt to rile up the goddess and force her to make the first move. The taunt was successful, as Lind wordlessly blasted towards her opponent as she launched a punch. Pan blocked the attack, only to be literally shocked by the electricity wreathing the goddess' arm. Their clash only lasted less than a second, but it was enough for Pan to receive a discharge of several millions volts that she felt all the way up to the spiky tips of her hair. "God damn it, I hate electric shocks," she said, rather annoyed by Lind's attack. Again did the white-clad goddess remain silent as she simply proceeded to attack her opponent again. She launched several more electrical charged attacks that Pan blocked despite the shocks she received as result, making her slightly grimace with each clash. Lind soon lost her patience at seeing her newest tactic fail, so she settled for grabbing Pan and lifting her by the shoulders and discharge all those dozen millions volts directly into her body. Pan didn't appreciate the gesture very much. The alien girl gritted her teeth against the immense electrical discharges running through her body. Seeing her adversary resisting her assault, Lind amped up her attack and increased the voltage more and more. Despite feeling as if her nervous system had been set on fire, Pan kept struggling against Lind's discharges with all her strength. Grabbing the older woman's wrists, the alien girl then pushed her, slowly but surely, off her shoulders and broke her hold over her, even as the goddess struggled against her resistance by keeping pumping more volts into her that continued delivering shock after shock into her body as she was still remaining in contact with the blue-haired woman. Pan ignored all pain thanks to her Saiyan strength and kept pushing Lind's arms back until the goddess was left completely open, and both combatants stared at each other's eyes face to face, their tips of their noses practically touching. "You've already tried electrical attacks against me before. What made you think they would be effective this time?" the alien girl said before delivering a powerful butt head right into Lind's face that practically pushed all the surrounding clouds away with its shockwave alone. Pan then proceeded to deliver a barrage of kicks into the goddess' abdomen that doubled her over. Enraged by her opponent's attack, Lind smashed her head into Pan's chin with a headbutt of her own before overcharging the electrical energies in her hands to the maximum in order to cause an electrical detonation that impacted into the alien girl's chest and sent her soaring further up into the sky. Still enraged by Pan's assault on her, Lind took the opportunity to start chanting another powerful spell. The alien girl, meanwhile, managed to stop her motion in cold and remain floating still several hundred meters high above her opponent. Pan touched her torso around the area where she was struck by Lind's lighting with small discomfort, as even the body of a Saiyan was susceptible to the power of the elements. Obviously not enough to prove any kind of risk against her life unless we are talking about extreme cold that is several hundred degrees under zero or extreme heat high enough to melt any kind of metal. As it is, the electrical attacks of the goddess simply left her with a slight stinging sensation behind, nothing more than a phantom feeling. Pan had to admit she was starting to enjoy this battle. It had been a while since she fought against an opponent who could at least give her a decent warm-up. But still, it was not enough to make her consider cut her whole power loose. She wasn't even using the 100% of her first Super Saiyan state yet, but maybe Lind would prove herself worthy of facing her true strength. As the goddess kept channelizing more and more magical energy over time, the longer the battle kept stretching, causing her power level to keep going up and up as result. Pan suspected if she were to be patient, Lind would be able to summon enough power to make their fight more fun. She was really looking forward to that. But she knew she shouldn't allow herself to be overconfident, as some of Lind's attacks had actually hurt a little. Damn. That was because she had let her guard down for a moment, as she is unable to accurately read the goddess' power with her senses. Lind's abilities seem to stem from mana, not ki, and she can't read mana. Only through Giru's scanners should she be able to get an accurate reading of Lind's power level. If only she hadn't left the little bucket of bolts behind. This is clearly a disadvantage that could prove disastrous if she were to underestimate her opponent. She knew very well she shouldn't look down on the power of magic, as Boo, another friend of her family, was once kept on a tight leash as a slave through magical means. Even her uncle Vegeta had once been mind-controlled because of magic, so yes, she knew how arbitrary and unfair magic could be. Oh, well, no use to cry over spilled milk. She'll just have to wing it and make sure to be on the lookout for any surprises that the blue-haired goddess might have in store. Looking down towards the goddess in question, Pan could see she was about to launch another powerful spell, as Lind was surrounded by a whirlwind of flames that were drawn into an orb of fire that the white-clad goddess held afloat between her hands. The ball of burning energy growing steadily more and more as more magical energy was being poured into it until it reached gargantuan sizes. Behind Lind, Pan was able to see the goddess, two angels pretty busy in what appeared to be a very strenuous prayer, understandable since that giant ball of flames certainly required as a great deal of magical energy to be created. Magical energy that was being focused by the two angels and sent into Lind through a very thick stream that was very obvious to the naked eye how heavily laced with mana it was. Pan grimaced, knowing the next attack of the goddess was going to be a painful nuisance. Immediately after the alien girl finished with her line of thought, did the white-clad goddess launch her massive orb of fire in her direction. There was no time to be launching energy attacks, because such a giant concentration of magical energy would require for her to focus her ki first in order to launch a beam powerful enough to overcome that thing. She could try to parry that spell with her bare hands or brace herself against it, but no way was she getting her hands burned just to stop a single attack. The easiest way would be to evade that burning orb, and that is exactly what she did, blasting quickly to a side with a burst of speed until was all she had to do to avoid Lind's spell. She then turned her attention down again towards the slightly winded goddess to prepare her counterattack, believing the ball of fire would simply keep on its way until reaching space where it would burn out due to the lack of oxygen. She wasn't expecting the flaming orb to explode with a massive detonation behind her when it reached high orbit with the strength of several hundred nukes. Boom! Pan was thrown about by the sudden unexpected explosion that began to cover the whole sky in a curtain of flames. The alien cursed to her insides for her carelessness as she was blown away by the shockwave like a ragdoll. Her patience growing thin, she released a burst of energy in order to come to a jarring halt and straighten her posture. Taking a moment to look at her surroundings, Pan witnessed the inferno that had been unleashed upon the helpless metropolis below and knew shit had just hit the fan. If she had been any other Saiyan, she probably wouldn't have cared much for the collateral damage and injury of innocent bystanders that their battle was causing. But she came from a line of honorable warriors. Her father Gohan and grandfather Goku, before he went away to who knows where, were always lecturing her about never using her power to oppress the weak and instead use it to defend them. Her grand Bardock on the other hand simply told her to leave the weaklings be, unless she were in their debt somehow, in which case she should intervene on their behalf as a way to repay the favor. The three agreed in the fact that a true warrior is able to avoid their battles from getting out of hand, being able to go all out against an opponent and win without having to destroy the entire landscape, and instilled into her the great importance of focus. So because of the values taught to her by the most important men in her life that she has always looked up to since she was a child, Pan couldn't simply leave the people of Tokyo helpless against a fiery death. So Pan blasted back towards the beleaguered city. Lind spotted her and tried to get in the way, but the alien girl immediately blocked her knee strike and retaliated by sinking her fist into the goddess' stomach. "I have no time to be playing with you right now. I have to clean up your mess first." Pan exclaimed before delivering a right hook into Lin's face, followed up by a small barrage of energy blasts that peppered the blue-haired woman like a machine gun, pushing her a couple of feet back, and then finalizing her attack by launching another Masenko that struck Lind right in the chest and blasted her back into the depths of the sea before detonating with a brilliant explosion that expelled a 30-meter-tall pillar of water into the air. Confident that would be enough to keep the white-clad goddess off her back for the moment, the alien girl proceeded to go to the rescue of the metropolis under assault. Flying at controlled hypersonic velocities, as to not end up causing more unwanted damage instead of helping out, Pan was able to extinguish most of the fires in downtown Tokyo with just the air currents created by her flying speed. But those were just the mere fires in the more urbanized wards and among the skyscrapers. For the minor ones she had to descend back into the ground and turn them off with focused pressure waves that she created with a swing of her arms. Among the streets of Shibuya, a scene out of hell was playing out, as one of the falling burning meteors had impacted right the middle of the main square, creating a huge fire that was beginning to spread into the surrounding department stores. People could do nothing but run around in panic like headless chickens as the fire began to consume everything in its path. Among this scene of destruction, a single girl with orange bleached hair and a red highlight, wearing a red coat and high heels, was the only one daring to brave the flames in order to help the people that had suddenly become trapped inside the stores. "Come on, everybody, get out of here, now. Quickly," Ran Kotobuki said to a bunch of scared civilians after she broke through a window inside a department store where burning debris was blocking the entrance and keeping them all trapped inside. The civilians, consisting mostly of young teenage girls alongside the female store clerks and some couples, quickly took heed of that advice and promptly escaped from the burning building. The orange-haired girl remained behind briefly to make sure there were no more people still trapped in the building. Her perusal was interrupted by a couple of voices she knew pretty well. "Ran, what are you doing? Get out of there now." Ran, the self-proclaimed super gal of Shibuya, turned around to find a couple of girls of her age on the other side of her makeshift entrance into the burning building and about to get inside to join her. A cute-looking short-haired blonde with pink highlights and an ebony long-haired beauty. These were Ran's best friends, Miyu Yamasaki and Aya Hoshino. The orange-haired teenager turned to signal her friends from entering inside the building. "Miyu, Aya, stop, do not come closer. This building is not stable," she exclaimed with urgency. A loud crack coming from above drew her attention, making Ran to look up in time to see as the roof caved down and collapse over her head, threatening to crush and bury her alive under tons of flaming and melted debris. Ran could do nothing but let out a scream under the gazes of her horrified friends as she crossed her arms in front of her face to avoid seeing the inescapable doom that was about to befall her. "Ah, Ran, Ran!" Suddenly, out of nowhere, one of the remaining front display windows of the store exploded inwards as a massive gush of wind entered inside the building, blowing off all sources of fire almost immediately. Ran suddenly disappeared from all sight just before the avalanche of debris was about to strike her. Her friends didn't have time to be amazed as the gush of wind began to blow in circles inside the department store, creating a small mini tornado, forcing the two gals to cover their faces against the strong air currents. After a few moments, the blowing wind began to die down and their friend that they almost thought dead simply landed at their feet, a stupidly dazed expression on her face with her eyes turned into swirls. "Ran!" Both girls exclaimed in delight at seeing their friend alive as if by miracle and wasted no time to throw themselves upon her. "Ran, are you all right?" said Miyu with worry for her friend. All he got as response was some unintelligible mumbles from the still dazed super gal. Before they could do a more thorough check-up on their friend, a small shadow fell upon the three gals. Both Miyu and Aya looked up only to become frozen by awe. Ran finally managed to get out of her funk, and after looking over her shoulders at both of her paralyzed friends, she too turned her gaze up to find out what the hell they were seeing. Only to let out a gasp as floating above the trio of friends was Pan, roaming her gaze around all her surroundings and taking notice of the fires wrecking throughout Shibuya. The three gals had never expected to be able to meet and be this close to the alien girl that had lately been the focus of the attention of the entire world. At this short distance they were able to take all of her features pretty clearly: the commanding posture, the strong unyielding gaze, the shining piercing eyes that seemed like emeralds, the slight glowing aura that emanated from her body and hummed with power, her spiky golden brilliant mane from which sparks of electricity could be seen dancing from the tips from time to time. All in all, she did make quite the imposing image. Wordlessly, without acknowledging the trio of gals yet, Pan made a single swiping motion with her left arm and released a mighty wave of wind that extinguished all of the flames that were burning on Shibuya's main street in an instant. It was then when the smoke began to settle that the alien girl finally turned her eyes towards the three girls. "You okay in there?" Pan said in a very neutral tone at the orange-bleached-haired super gal. Despite her obvious odd shock, Ran was able to reply with a numb nod. "Good," the alien girl said succinctly before turning her gaze away from the girls and up to the sky. "Sorry for the dizzy ride, but I had to gradually reduce my speed and bleed out my momentum to make sure you didn't got injured or worse because of whiplash. You humans are such fragile beings after all. Now if you excuse me, I have to make sure the rest of this city doesn't go out in flames." With that, Pan simply blasted off into the sky, leaving a faint trail of energy behind and releasing a sonic boom as she broke through the sound barrier with her speed. The three gals simply remained in their places with awestruck expressions as they watched the alien girl leave. They remained frozen on their spots for a few more seconds after Pan had flied away. That is until Ran managed to recover first. "Wow, we just met Pan the Saiyan. And she saved my life. How cool is that?" the self-declared #1 gallon of Shibuya exclaimed, turning to her friends. Both Miyu and Aya could not help but turn towards Ran with incredulous looks. Ran, on another part of Toyo, in one of the many bridges that connected the special wards together, a patrol car of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department from the Bakudo Percent Traffic Division in the Sumida Ward, manned by two female officers, a short-haired brunette and a long ebony-haired woman, received an emergency transmission from Central while it was doing its rounds through the city. "Attention! All available units must report immediately to the nearest emergency command center to aid in the evacuation of civilians." The slightly distorted voice of the female dispatcher operator said through the police radio. "Faye, with the sky practically falling down, why I am not surprised we are being called to do relief work," Natsumi Sugimoto said towards her friend Miyuki Kobayakawa as she attented the call on the radio. "Well Miyuki, you heard what Yoriko said, time to roll." "Right," the ebony-haired woman at the wheel answered with a nod as she set the stick to the highest velocity while she activated the hidden speed features of her heavily modified Honda Today. The compact patrol car blasted off in an instant at hundreds of km/h through the highways of Tokyo. Sadly, it seemed luck was not on the two young women's side today, as one of the falling burning balls of fire struck the highway right in front of them with a loud explosion that destroyed the entire section of the bridge they were about to pass through. "Shit, Miyuki, watch out! Exclamation mark. The black-haired policewoman snapped the entire wheel to the right in a sudden violent motion as she punched the brakes with her feet, making the whole patrol car swerve to a side as it tried to stop its momentum in cold, skidding through the entire road with a high-pitched screech. It was not enough, however, as the compact car soon found itself in a long free fall of almost 100 feet in height towards the water. Both female officers could do nothing but scream and cover their eyes as they waited for the inevitable. "Ah, thunk," which came as a great surprise for both women to suddenly find their fall coming to a jarring stop after only barely a dozen feet. They both opened their eyes in confusion as they had expected to be dead. Looking through the windshield, both women let out a gasp of surprise as they found Pan holding their patrol car by the front over her head with a single hand as she floated statically in the air. "Hold on for a moment, officers, let me get you back on the road," the alien girl said plainly as she floated back up towards the bridge from where the patrol car had fallen from and set it in its respective lane, on the side of the road that the two women were heading to before the flaming meteor had struck. "How very nice of her. There, have a nice day, officers, and drive safely. Oh, and don't worry about the rain of fire, I'll take care of it shortly after I deal with the fires burning through the city," Pan said as she let go of the patrol car upon the pavement before she blasted off into the sky. The two female officers simply remained rooted to their seats with laborious breaths trying to calm themselves down. They were understandably pretty shaken up by their near-death experience. After a few seconds, Natsumi spoke. "Hey, Miyuki, yeah, Natsumi, that was that Pan girl who just saved us, right?" the brunette said through ragged breath. Yes, I think she was, the other woman said through her own shock. Okay, I just wanted to be sure, she said before slumping on her seat. On a certain dojo on Narima, the inhabitants were too having their own struggle against a sudden wildfire. Ranma, you have to do something before the house burns down, Akane Tendo said, while cradling Pichan, at her fiancé as he set both of her sisters down in the courtyard, as he had braved the flames to get them out after having gotten her out first. Yeah, Ranma, you should. Or would you prefer instead on lending me a hand to get the money necessary to pay for the reconstruction costs? Nabiki said, raising an eyebrow at the pigtailed martial artist. Ranma Saotome, martial artist extraordinaire and prodigy, simply grimaced at the thought of having to help the middle Tendo in another one of her money-making schemes. Passing his gaze over the rest of the courtyard, he was able to see Mr. Tendo wailing on his spot while pulling at his hair at seeing his house going out in flames and his own father running around the place screaming as his fat ass had literally been caught on fire. Ain't gonna be getting any help from those two, he muttered to himself before taking another look around the place, feeling somebody was missing. Where the hell is Haposai? My silky darlings. Right, forget I ask. Ranma deadpanned, figuring out exactly what the old pervert was doing. He then proceeded to head towards the Tendo Patriarch and slightly pushed him aside in order to deal with the fire. Stand aside, Mr. Tendo, I'll deal with this. Ranma, you have to do something before the house goes down on flames. Mr. Tendo said, turning towards the pigtailed martial artist with a wail as a flood of tears surged from his eyes. The high-pitched voice of the Tendo family chief drew the attention of Ranma's good-for-nothing father. Boy, you must put this fire out before we become homeless. It is your duty as a martial artist, the pudgy man said, as small trails of smoke escaped from his scorched body. Ranma just bristled at his father's incompetence, no surprise there. Well, I don't see you volunteering to deal with this fire, Pops. Anyway, I've already said I would take care of this, so stand aside, old man, you're getting in the way, the pigtailed martial artist said as he shoved his way past his father. He then kept walking for a few steps more until he was in front, looking up at the Tendo's house whose entire upper floor was already on flames. Alright, this should be pretty easy, Ranma said as he cracked his neck. He then began to move rapidly in the area where he was standing in a short spiraling pattern as he began to draw the heat expelled by the fire to himself while activating his Soul of Ice technique to expel the necessary cold Ki to match the power of the conflagration. Once he reached the center of his spiral, Ranma threw a punch towards the sky that created a small tornado that rose towards the burning heavens as it attracted towards itself all of the flames that were wreaking havoc in the Tendo compound. Shiryu, Hotten, ha! The fire soon died out as it was sucked completely by the small tornado created by the pigtailed martial artist in the courtyard, leaving the Tendo residents relatively unharmed, before it dissipated into the wind. Ranma simply dusted his hands off at a job well done. Well, that's that, he said, pretty pleased with himself. Well, that was certainly a neat technique you got there. You did a pretty good job in taking care of that fire. A voice said from Ranma's left, certainly appreciating the skills of the pigtailed martial artist. Thanks, but as no biggie, I'm the best martial artist there is, after all. He said boastfully, turning towards the voice for a moment before returning to appraise his own handiwork, only to do a double take as he gaped in disbelief at the speaker. For standing on his left, sitting nonchalantly atop one of the decorative stone lamps of the courtyard, was Pan in her super state form, staring at him evenly as she rested her chin on her hands. Is that so? Well, I hope you don't take it wrong if I feel a little bit skeptical about that particular boast. The alien girl said while still maintaining a neutral look. It seemed her unexpected appearance really caught all of the inhabitants of the Tendo compound off guard, as they all seemed to jump in shock at the sight of her. Holy shit! Nabiki exclaimed in complete astonishment, just like the rest of her family and the Saotomes. Well, except Kasumi, she was still pretty calm despite all the latest excitement. Though she was indeed a little troubled on the inside, that is if we consider that the biggest concern passing through her head at the moment was how dreadful she thought that the house was not being currently in the best presentable condition to be receiving guests, and famous guests at that. Oh dear, And she didn't had any tea ready at the moment for their unexpected visitor. She just hoped the fire hadn't caused any damage to the china set. Ranma just pointed at the alien girl while he continued gaping. "You, what are you doing here?" he asked, not in the most subtle of tones. But Pan didn't care anything about that and simply replied with a careless shrug. "Well, I've been flying all around Tokyo trying to put out all of these fires. I thought my help was required in here when I saw your house was on fire, but it appears I was not needed in here after all, since it seems you've got things under control. So I'll be going right now, if you don't mind. No time to chat, have a city to save and all that," the alien girl said as she jumped off from the stone lamp and landed on the grass before she dusted off the back of her jeans. "Oh, and before I go," she said, turning towards Ranma and pointing at him with a finger. "You seem to have quite the talent to become a strong warrior. If you wish to receive training from me and learn some neat techniques, come and find me after all of this trouble is done. We'll put your boast to the test and see if you're as good as you claim, but whether you take me up on my offer or not, I'm going to make sure to keep an eye on you," Pan said with a little wicked smile, before she shot up into the sky and disappeared into the distance, leaving a faint trail of energy behind. The Tendos and the Saotomes simply remained numbed on their spots as they stared after the departing alien girl. But Ranma easily got out of his funk as his shock was soon replaced by excitement. "God damn it, I really want to learn how to fly. I'm so taking her up on her offer. I'm going to make sure she teaches me her neat techniques even if I have to beg," the pigtailed young man exclaimed as he kept looking at the sky. Akane turned immediately towards her fiancé with a look of complete jealousy. "That's not fair. I want to be trained by Pan the Saiyan too. She's my hero." She abruptly let go of P-chan, letting the small porcine topple on the grass and lunged towards Ranma, grabbing the pigtailed martial artist by the shoulders while jostling him back and forth with great motivation. "Take me with you." The only response that her fiancé could give to her was an unintelligible mumble, as he was too dizzied by the rough treatment of the youngest Tendo to give any kind of proper reply. Back in the broken and desolated construction site, the followers of Pan kept staring up at the burning skies waiting for something to happen. Good thing they were paying attention, because a giant ball of fire was heading straight to their direction. "Everybody get out of the way," Foxy yelled as the flaming projectile approached. All of the fighters and apprentices standing on their places did just that and leapt the hell away before the ball of fire struck their position. Those too injured to move or dodge in time were helped by their close comrades or masters to get to a safe distance, but the important thing was that nobody was near the impact zone when the burning meteor smashed into the ground. The ball of fire hit the dirt with a thunderous detonation of scorching heat that set almost half of the construction site ablaze. The gathered fighters, and goddesses present, recoiled for a moment at the insufferable temperature. They began to consider their options on how to proceed when Pan landed with a ground-shaking impact in front of the raging fire and blew it out with a wave of her arm, releasing a great wind pressure from her swing. "So, how's everybody been doing during my absence?" the alien girl asked to her underlings with such a carefree attitude, as if nothing of note were to be happening at the moment, like goddamn fire falling out of the sky or something. Her followers approached her, obeying the call of their boss. "Well, actually, we've been pretty fine all things considered, though I must admit seeing a rain of fire falling down from the sky has been rather distressing, but all in all I have nothing to complain about." Mature confessed, rather relaxed despite the current situation. Pan acknowledged the words of her secretary with a nod. "Well, don't worry about that. I've already dealt with all of the fires that were wreaking havoc throughout all of Tokyo. Taking care of this little firestorm should now be nothing more but child's play without any more distractions," she explained, rather nonchalant. Mature nodded in understanding at those words, alongside Vice, Foxy and Kusanada. Seemed Nina's words were proven true after all. There was certainly nothing to be worried about with Pan on the scene. The short alien had already proven herself unbelievable powerful already, so it stood to reason that she would be able to easily deal with a crisis of this magnitude. Pan was about to head out to do what she had claimed when she was stopped by Erdhu walking towards her and not in the most pleasant of moods. This is your fault. This is exactly why we didn't want Lin to fight against you. We knew something like this could happen. I hope you're happy now that the entire city is about to be devoured by a sea of fire," very nicely done by the way. The white-haired goddess said, giving 2 thumbs up at the alien girl in a sarcastic manner. Kami-sama, damn you all battle maniacs. The Saiyan teen didn't seem fazed in the least by the Norn's sarcasm. I see you're not going to stop nagging me about this anytime soon. Whatever. As I was saying before being rudely interrupted, now that I've took care of the fires raging through the city, I can now focus on dealing with this little rain of fire. Just keep your tanned ass in place and let me take care of this. Pan said, bluing Erd off, who simply gave her a nasty killing glare at her comments. Seemed the Norn of the past was still pretty incensed at Pan for having attacked her and her sisters, and then taken both her siblings hostage and used them against her. Well, that's understandable after all. Pan, Giru called, humping and waving his tiny robot arms around trying to catch the attention of the alien girl. Pan however did not have time to be dealing with him. Not now Giru, I have a crisis to resolve first. The girl then turned her head to look at Keiichi, who was kneeling in the ground while carrying Belldandy bridal style in his lap, and gave a nod of acknowledgement at the young mechanic. You've been true to your word so far, I can respect that. Now is time for me to be true to mine, so don't worry and let me fix this. She said as she turned her gaze back to the burning heavens before she shot upright towards the blazing skies. As she found herself floating above Tokyo once more, Pan crossed her hands over her forehead again and began to focus her ki. A bright ball of energy soon appeared, forming on her just above her temple, growing brighter and brighter as it gathered ki with each passing second. The ball grew until it doubled the size of Pan's own head before the alien girl finally launched her technique. Great Misenko! The beam of light soared through the sky like a shooting star before smashing right in the middle of the burning heavens. The ensuing detonation being so powerful as to cover all of the sky with a blinding light that shone so strongly like a second sun above the city of Tokyo. Everybody down in the ground was forced to cover their eyes against the sudden surge of light as the force expelled by the explosion created a small earthquake that shook the entire Japanese capital briefly for several long moments. As the light began to die down, those who were watching were able to see how a gigantic hole had been carved in the middle of the flames covering the sky, a result of the potent forces created by the explosion. The rest of the flames began to diminish and die, starting to go out until they were nothing more but little burning embers being blown off by the wind. The hole continued to expand until all of the flames were finally out, leaving nothing but a clear cloudless sky over the metropolis of Tokyo. Pan simply nodded in satisfaction at a job well done before returning to the ground back to her minions. Well, that should take care of the problem, she said towards her followers as soon as she touched ground. What about that goddess you were fighting against? Foxy asked in an even tone. The Saiyan teen just shrugged as response. I don't know. I haven't seen her since I blasted her into the sea to keep her from getting in my way while I was trying to save this city. Maybe I knocked her out without intending to, which means I win our little match by default. She said, pretty unconcerned. Wrong, Belldandy said, walking towards Pan from behind. I don't know if you're able to feel magical energy, but while you've been busy dealing with the firestorm, Lin's power has been increasing all this time as she's been tapping more and more on her true reserves of mana. The beautiful brunette said as she looked pretty worked up and nervous about something. Unaware to them all, she and her sisters could clearly feel how Lind was growing strong as she released all of her limiters completely and funneled her vast reserves of magic into her body. She's right, Giru. That other goddess is not out of this fight yet, Giru. The little robot companion of Pan chirped in with a rather happy tune. What do you mean by that? Pan demanded immediately, her entire mood turning serious in an instant. That is when suddenly all of the people standing almost ended up falling into the ground as they were caught off guard by the unexpected powerful tremor that began to shake the earth. Pan had to wait for the ground to stop moving before she could get an answer to her question. Just as the Norn of the present has said, Pan, Giru, while you were busy saving the city and dealing with the rain of fire, your opponent has taken the opportunity to summon a distressingly high amount of magical energy into herself, Giru. The tiny robot said in his usual funny voice. Goddammit, Giru, why couldn't you have warned me about this sooner? The alien girl demanded, none too pleased with this new revelation. I did try to warn you about this, Giru. But you didn't want to listen to me, Giru. Not much I can do when you're in one of your moods, Giru, the little robot replied plainly, not fazed at the anger of his owner. Pan simply tsked at that answer and decided to move on. There were more important matters to deal with anyway. Whatever, I guess I'll have to stop playing and start taking things seriously, she said as she cracked her knuckles. Time to put that goddess down, she declared before she began to let out the full power of her Super Saiyan state. All of the fighters that could sense ki simply fell to their knees as their senses became overwhelmed by the true power that the alien had been keeping suppressed all this time. They had thought they could not be any more surprised by the power that the Saiyan teen possessed. They were wrong. Giru spoke again, unmindful of all of the fighters shivering in the ground because of the horrible pressure smashing over their senses. Careful Pan, Giru, you may finally have decided to start fighting with your true strength, Giru. But Lind has been focusing an unbelievable quantity of magical energy into herself, Giru. That should be a considered matter of serious concern for just about anyone, Giru. Even for a Saiyan, Giru. The miniature robot warned. The alien girl just replied with a stiff nod. I understand Giru. I'm pretty aware of what magic can do, even towards my kind. Do not worry, I know what I am doing, she said before shooting into the sky again before heading towards the waters of the bay again in search of her opponent. Pan flew over the surrounding sea for a moment, keeping her senses sharp for any signal of the blue-haired goddess, and finding none despite her best efforts. Tisk, where could she be, she thought to herself, before a blinding white beam of light suddenly broke through the waters underneath her and struck her in full. Pan only had time to cross her arms in front of her before the beam smashed into her with burning force. She was pushed several hundred feet backwards as she blocked the sudden attack, the energy washing all over her. The beam of light eventually died down, leaving a smoking Pan still with her defense up behind. The Saiyan teen finally lowered her defense, only to feel a stinging sensation of pain on her arms. Goddammit, it hurts, the alien girl exclaimed before proceeding to assess the condition of her arms and found they had been burned until the skin had scalded, leaving her limbs with a red coloration due to the bursted blood vessels. Pan was surprised for a moment after discovering that the energy attack of the goddess had been powerful enough to actually hurt her. This made her mind to fully enter into battle mode. No more fooling around, she's going to bring Lind down and bring her down hard. From beneath the waves of the bay, the goddess in question burst forth, completely covered in a flaming white-blue aura, a testament of the great amount of magical energy she was expelling. Her angels flying behind her attached to her back were too covered in the same flaming aura like their host, the eyes of the three divine beings radiating raw and uncontrolled streams of energy in torrents. Lind simply floated unconcerned until she was right on Pan level and remained aloft in the air to stare at the alien girl right in the eyes. Pan wasn't undeterred in the least at her opponent's attempt at intimidation and replied by flaring her own burning aura to match Lind's. Both combatants simply remained motionless in the air for several long moments as they stared at each other without even blinking, the enormous energies being expelled by the two cracking and lashing against each other between them. Time for the next round, the warrior goddess simply stated emotionless. Pan nearly tilted her head to a side without taking her eyes from her opponent to acknowledge those words. Yes, let's, was all she said as the two powerful females grew silent once more, before both smashed their fists on each other's faces with such a tremendous impact that the whole sky seemed to rumble. The two then engaged in an impressive exchange of punches, throwing all skill and defense away to focus solely on the offense, the heavens once more being filled with the deafening pistoning of their clash, as the shockwaves of their impacts were able to shook the skies and the ground while being able to be felt and heard by everybody dwelling in Tokyo and the surrounding areas. Clearly, neither of the two women had any intention of backing down from this fight. Both combatants just kept pummeling each other non-stop, shrugging all damage they received as if it was nothing. At this rate it would certainly take a long while before any of the two began to tire out. It was pretty doubtful that the city of Tokyo would remain standing in one piece if things continued like this, not with all these tremors running amok. It seemed the two women realized a change of tactics was needed, and for that Lind suddenly used her greater height to her advantage by landing a knee strike into Pan's chin that lifted the shorter girl up to the goddess, arm level. Lin then threw a haymaker, hoping to land a powerful hit on her opponent, but Pan recovered in time to avoid the punch and grabbed the attacking Lim by the wrist and forearm with her two hands. She then slid around underneath Lin's arm to come out from behind her shoulder and connected a devastating kick on the back of the goddess' head that sent her plummeting towards the sea. But Pan wasn't going to let off from her offensive that easily, so she grabbed the goddess by the union between her and one of her angels and janked Lin violently back towards her. The little angel in question that she had pulled by what was supposed to be her legs, even though said legs were nothing more but a strange alien membrane that kept her and her host joined, wailed in pain at the rough treatment, clearly showing she hadn't appreciated that stunt. In retaliation, both she and her twin took hold of the alien girl and zapped her with a few 100,000 volts of electricity. Obviously, the effect was immediate as Pan let go of the membrane while she jerked back in pain. "Ouch. That hurt, you little pieces of shit," she cursed as she tossed a murderous glare towards Lin's angels. The cute little winged girls simply crossed their arms and nodded in satisfaction. Before the Saiyan teen could extract her vengeance, the body of Lin smashed into her as it was still on the fly by the momentum of her pull and sent both combatants sprawling through the air in a tangle of limbs. The two little angels simply stared at this latest development in puzzlement, until they remembered they too were supposed to be joined to the body of the goddess, so they soon found themselves being dragged along through the air by the two uncontrolled falling women, the cries of surprise and help of the two angels sounding throughout the sky. As they kept spinning without direction through Tokyo's skyline, both combatants managed to recover the best they could while still stuck with each other, before they began to throw punches and start hitting themselves once more. Talking about single-mindedness, these girls would certainly not let up their fight for anything in the world. While both women kept punching the shit out of each other as they spun around through the air in a very sharp descent, the course of their fall began to lead them back towards the city. The two combatants ended up bouncing from and through the walls of several skyscrapers before they had a clear free fall and smashed into a small park somewhere in Tokyo with the strength of a meteor. A Porsche, manned by two female officers from the Katsushika District Police, blazed through the streets of Katsushika Ward attending the multiple distress calls from the inhabitants of the ward. It may look strange that a policewoman were to be driving such a luxurious car as her patrol vehicle of choice, but the police force around these parts of Tokyo was not composed of what could be considered your regular out-of-the-mill officers, and that is not supposed to be a good thing. Reiko Catherine Akamoto, an attractive buxom long-haired blonde half-French woman that dresses in a pink police uniform with a miniskirt of all things, turned her gaze away from the road to look up at the sky as she suddenly began to hear a strange sound coming from above. "What is that?" she exclaimed, drawing the attention of her partner. Maria Asato, a beautiful buxom long-haired brunette." Both women were treated to the sight of Lind and Pan falling through the sky while tangled and tossing loud deafening punches at each other. The two little angels joined with Lind being dragged behind the two combatants against their will as they wailed and waved their arms around in desperation. The two female officers could simply gape, not believing what they were seeing. "Are those Pan and the goddess she's supposed to be fighting against?" I said with a gobsmacked expression. The two policewomen kept staring as both the alien and the goddess continued with their blazing descent, and were able soon to realize that it was probably going to be a loud landing. "Watch out!" I yelled, before a thunderous earth-shattering impact shook the whole ground. Reiko was forced to hit the brakes in full to avoid crashing into something, her Porsche skidding a little through the street before coming to a stop. Both women groaned at the strain caused by that sudden jolt but were able to quickly compose themselves. "Did you saw where they landed?" asked I to her partner. "I think they crashed in Kamiri Park," Akamoto replied, looking towards the direction of the crash in concern. Gasped Ryo-san and the others. "We have to go there now," the brunette exclaimed in alarm, worried about the well-being of the short, grumpy, lazy and irresponsible fellow police officer she was enamored with. "Right," the gorgeous blonde acknowledged with a nod before she almost practically ripped the driving stick out from its place as she got her Porsche moving again and rushed at full speed towards the direction of the impact. Kamiri Park, a small square of land in the middle of the city for children to play, located in Tokyo's Katsushika Ward. At the back end of this park there's a small police box whose entrance faces the street instead of the park, Little more than a cramped office with a single holding space in the back, good only to keep drunks or small-time thieves and criminals in custody, but usually used as a storing space where the police officers that are usually stationed in there can attend to the complaints or cries of help from the citizens of the wards while on duty or in patrol and provide information and assistance to anyone who requests it. At least that's how things were supposed to be in theory, reality being much different because of the ineptitude of the police officers that usually work in this place. This particular box has quite the reputation in the ward, for it is here where a certain infamous patrolman is usually stationed. Right now, said patrolman was doing his best to refuse going outside as he latched himself to his desk with all the strength he could muster while two of his coworkers tried to convince him to stop being so childish and start doing his job, by pulling him from his legs and attempting to drag him outside against his will. Come on, Senpai, we have to go out there. People are counting on us in this time of crisis. Everyone else has already gone out to do what they can. The entire police force is being called to assist in maintaining order on the streets until the current disaster ends. Keiichi Nakagawa, a young handsome and rich shoulder-length haired half-French brunette who dresses in an expensive pinstriped yellow police uniform with matching hat, said as he pulled at the legs of his shorter superior with all of his strength in an attempt to snap him out of his cowardice and make him start acting like a proper police officer. Obviously, he was failing miserably in that particular endeavor. The senpai in question simply kept digging his nails on his desk while wailing and tossing a tantrum like a little spoiled child. Well, at least he was of the right height. No, you can't force me to go out there. There's fire raining down from the skies and earthquakes wrecking the whole of Earth. I knew it was going to be a bad thing to have an alien running around in our country. They should have deported her back to her planet. Why did she have to come and start messing up our beautiful nation? Having filthy foreigners polluting our soil is what must have angered the kamis. That's why that goddess appeared and unleashed a firestorm. It's a divine punishment brought upon us lowly mortals for harboring aliens. A divine punishment, I tell you. The head patrol officer, Ryatsu Kenkichi, the direct superior and senpai to Nakagawa, wailed pitifully, doing his best to avoid having to face the crisis running rampant outside his police box. Ryatsu was a man of short stature, one could accurately call him a midget, well more like a dwarf in truth, sporting a hairstyle crew cut and always wearing some ratty and tacky sandals even when he's supposed to be dressed in his police uniform. If there was one word that could be used to better describe this man, it would be useless. He was probably the most inept and shameful police officer in the entire history, usually lazing about most of the time inside his police box and always trying to find excuses to skim on his job. That is when he is not hatching one of his ridiculous money-making schemes that usually take advantage of one of the latest trends and fads to make some quick cash on the side. Cash that he squanders all on toys, gadgets, alcohol, video games, porn, pachinko or horse races. Certainly he wasn't the prime example of what a police officer should be. He is famous for his short temper that is always getting him in trouble with his superiors and turned him into the terror of the local populace, also a very traditionalist man and pretty narrow-minded against anything from the world outside of Japan. Unreliable in anything regarding actual police work, irresponsible, good for nothing, ne'er-do-wheel, bum, the embarrassment of the force, all these things are true about Ryatsu Kenkichi. However, despite all the flaws he had as a person and as a police officer, which are just too numerous to describe, he had his own good points and qualities too. He is a very loyal man towards his fellow police officers, when he is not getting them into trouble because of his schemes, but when one of his coworkers is in a jam or their lives are in danger, they can rely on Ryatsu to help them and cover their backs. Surprisingly very competent and analytical when serious and possessing superhuman strength and stamina that he relies upon during times of crisis. Despite being a lazy ass, he holds the record of the highest amount of arrests in the entire department. Although those arrests usually involve some ridiculous, lame or embarrassing situation, he does enough to appease superiors and avoid getting his ass fired. But right now, this was not one of his most shining moments. BWAAAA. I don't want to go out. You can't make me. Please, senpai. Yup, not a shining moment at all. But boss, it's been several minutes now since the rain of fire died out. It is safe to go out now without having to worry about being crushed by a flaming meteor. And about the tremors, well, this is Japan. We are used to the occasional earthquake striking without notice. We all been trained in what to do during a disaster like this. So we have to go out and do what has been taught to us. The other officer Hayato Honda said as he too pulled at one of the legs of the short-haired patrolman. He was a young man, part of the motorcycle division of Katsushika's police station assigned to the Kamiri police box and direct underling to Ryatsu, which explained why he was dressed in full motorcycle police regalia, helmet included. Underneath said helmet he sports a pompadour haircut, a memento from his teenage motorcycle gang days. Although usually a very shy and calm person, the moment he gets on top of his motorcycle his entire personality changes to that of an aggressive and intimidating man from his gang days. In this state no motor gangster is a match to him as he still thinks and acts like one. But anyway, neither of the two young police officers was having much success in convincing their short senpai to stop fooling around and go out to do his job. They remained playing their little tug-o-war game when suddenly an earth-shattering impact shook the entire police box and sent the three defenders of the public order to the ground. The force of the impact had been so strong that they three believed that the police box was about to crumble with them inside. Luckily, the small building held itself together until the shockwaves and tremors died down, and leave the three policemen somewhat dazed and wondering what the hell had happened. "Shit, what the fuck was that?" inquired Ryatsu not too subtle as he stood up again, grimaced a little before dusting himself off. I don't know, senpai. That was quite the loud impact. It seems something big crashed in the middle of the park," Nakagawa said as he coughed some dust while remaining on all fours in the ground and tried the best he could to recompose himself after an entire bookshelf had struck him in the back. Ryatsu just stared at his downed Kahai for a moment with an unreadable expression before he turned towards his other underling. "Hayato, take a look outside through the window and tell us what you see while I help Nakagawa," he ordered with authority, his mind starting to shifting gears into analytical mode, letting the veteran and experienced police officer he truly is underneath all of his vices and bad habits show while he began to think in what to do to pull his two underlings through this new predicament. "Right as you say, boss," Hayato said as he recomposed himself and cleared his head before carrying on with that instruction. The motorcycle policeman approached and took a glance through the window facing towards the park, only to almost fall back down in shock at what he just saw. The whole small park had ceased to exist and it was nothing more than a big crater now, but that wasn't the reason he was so shocked. No, what really shocked him was that among the thick smoke screens released from the impact he was able to devise the sight of both Pan and Lind rising from inside the crater. "Come on, little goddess, don't tell me that's all you've got." The alien girl spat, a small bleeding bruise at the corner of her mouth as she stood up back again, ignoring all damage that the impact of the crash might have done to her as if she didn't even had felt it. There was a high possibility of that being the case. As if prompted by those words, the blue-haired goddess pushed herself up from the ground with strenuous effort, a bleeding wound in the middle of her forehead from which blood trickled all the way down through her face in long and thin rivulets. She didn't acknowledge those small trifles and just lifted her arms in a defensive stance once more, even if her two angels were having a much harder time in getting back up. "It would require much more than this to keep me down," she stated with an expression of pure resolution. Pan just smiled at her response. "Good. It wouldn't be fun otherwise," she said, before both combatants rushed at each other and clashed in the middle of the destroyed park with another powerful impact. The young police officer could only gape at seeing such battle between superhumans happening so close in front of his eyes. Boss. It's that Pan girl and the goddess. They're here and are fighting right in the middle of the park." Hayato all but screamed in terrified shock. That statement was certainly not something that Ryatsu was eager to hear. "What?" he exclaimed with a look of utter disbelief as both he and Nakagawa were utterly astonished by what the motorcycle cop had said. "Shit, get out of the way," Hayato yelled before diving to a side, none a moment too soon before the alien and the goddess came plowing through the wall and smashed on the other side of the police box. Ryatsu tackled Nakagawa back into the ground as soon as he saw the wall bursting apart in a shower of debris and used his own body to protect his Kahai from all harm. It would appear Lind had managed to get the upper hand over her opponent on their last exchange, for she was the one who had smashed Pan through the wall and was now keeping her pinned on the opposite one with her hand pressing on the alien girl's face. But the teen Saiyan wasn't giving the white-clad goddess an easy time despite her momentarily disadvantage as she kept tossing kicks and punches in an effort of getting the older woman off her. The three police officers could do nothing but stare in frightened awe at the two unbelievable powerful women ducking it out right in front of them. Lind eventually had enough of Pan's opposition and whipped the smaller girl around to launch her violently towards the back of the police box, where the small holding cell was. Lind then went over there to keep raining down the beatdown. The three police officers only had a second to catch her breath, before Lind was blasted towards the front and out of the police box into the street with all in her angels by two brilliant beams of energy where she smashed into a parked automobile that exploded with a deafening detonation. Pan simply walked from the back of the police box and headed outside, stopping for a moment to address the three patrolmen that were still taking cover on the floor. "Sorry for the mess, but as you can see, she's quite the vicious one. I'm really starting to like her. Anyway, you officers should stay clear from here while she and I solve our differences," she said before jumping outside through the hole that was on the front where the entrance of the police box was located just a few moments ago. Ryotsu could just stare. "These damn aliens," was all he said with a dumbfounded shake of his head. The moment Pan landed outside was the moment she had to jump again to avoid an explosive attack, as Lind had sucked all the fire from the explosion into another one of her spells to create a fireball that she threw at the alien girl. The alien girl was able to avoid most of the brunt of the attack because of her quick reflexes, but she still was forced to cross her arms in front of her to protect herself against the heat due to her close proximity to the detonation. Pan didn't had time to rest once the explosion had passed, as an ice stake suddenly bursted from the middle of the street and nailed her on the back, launching her upwards a little. It seemed Lind was beginning to employ her ice spells again. The alien girl had to contain a grimace at the pain. Good thing she was keeping her senses on alert, because Lind was flying towards her by the front from below to try to nail her with a punch. Pan welcomed her by smashing her knee into her face before she moved one of her arms backwards over her shoulder to grab the ice stake behind her and snapped the whole thing off, which then she used to bat Lind away from her. The ice construction breaking into thousands of little fragments as the goddess was sent crashing into a rooftop of one of the buildings in front of the police box on the other side of the street. Now it was Pan who was lunging at her opponent, trying to crash into her with a powerful impact. Lind simply hurled herself at the incoming alien girl and both women smashed against each in the air above the street before falling back into the pavement once more with a great impact, breaking the concrete and creating a crater in the middle of the street where they continued tossing punches at each other. It was in this moment that a Porsche suddenly appeared driving fast from the end of the street and suddenly climbed up the sidewalk where it did a sharp brake, making a high-pitched screech as it began to stop in its tracks, before finally parking almost in front of the destroyed police box. From the expensive car, two attractive police women climbed down, one blonde wearing a pink version of the police uniform while the other black-haired one was wearing a standard proper uniform with hat and all. The two immediately went inside the police box and started to search for their fellow companions still inside. "Ryo-san, where are you?" I called with worry as she entered inside the police box through the hole up front. "I'm fine, Maria. We're all still in one piece in here. Come, give me a hand to get Nakagawa and Honda out of here," the short patrolman said as he stood up from the ground while supporting Keiichi at the same time, one arm of the yellow pinstriped dressed police officer over his shoulder. Reiko was at the side of both officers in a moment, and helped Ryotsu in moving Nakagawa by supporting the brunette man other arm. "Kei-chan, what happened to you?" "Ryo-chan, what's wrong with Kei-chan?" the blonde bombshell asked with heavy concern after seeing the condition of her yellow-dressed companion. "A bookshelf fell and punched him in the back, other than that he's fine. Come, help me bring him outside before this whole place crumbles on top of us. Maria, you help Hayato in getting out of here," Ryotsu ordered to his fellow cops before all of them did as instructed and leave the devastated police box in a hurry. However, being outside didn't mean they were in any less danger than what they were when inside the box. As soon as they stepped outside, the 5 officers almost fell back to the ground due to a powerful shockwave being released by one of the punches that the two outworldly females were tossing with each clash. Obviously, It was stupid for simple mortals like them to be this close to the battle between such powerhouses. Come on, we have to get out here before we get ourselves killed, Ryotsu declared with a yell to keep his companions on the move. My car is right here. It would be a little cramped in there if all of us climb inside, but we can use it to get out of here fast, Reiko said while motioning towards her Porsche. The short police officer only replied with a nod. Then let's go. We don't have time to waste, he ordered. The quintet was quick in approaching the luxurious car, which was practically parked close to a side of the police box, when they were forced to duck and take cover behind the vehicle as the entire street was suddenly filled by a multitude of explosions, long rays of light raining down from the sky while the white-clad goddess and her angels hovered above and unleashed such destruction. While the 5 police officers were busy planning their retreat, Pan had managed to inflict a particular painful strike into Lin's abdomen that pissed the blue-haired goddess to no end, causing her to lash at the alien girl in a rage and crushing her into the ground with a double axe handle to the head before taking back to the skies and unleashing a barrage of unrestrained energy attacks that turned everything underneath the goddess into a sea of fire, the beams of light striking indiscriminately over every single thing below, not caring one bit about collateral damage. The small group of law enforcers could do nothing but huddle together on their places in fright as everything in front of their eyes simply melted into slag in a great fiery storm. The strength of the shockwaves released by such powerful explosions was so great that it lifted Reiko's Porsche from its place and flipped it over before tossing it several dozen feet behind the gathered police officers. The luxurious vehicle simply passing above the heads of the frightened and stunned cops and leaving the 5 of them completely exposed. Pan simply endured the rain of explosive energy blasts like only a Saiyan could, and was not too much worn out for it, only a few singes and slight burns here and there. She however took notice of the 5 police officers that were too close to the battle and running a very high risk of being injured or worse by accident. Fuck, this is what happens for having such high-level battles inside heavily dense population centers and with Lind launching energy blasts all around indiscriminately without a care. It was more than certain that the quintet of cops were going to be caught by a stray blast. It seemed Belldandy predictions about Lind were coming true. The blue goddess single-mindedness was really starting to become a problem. She had stopped giving a fuck already about collateral damage as long as she was able to nail Pan with her attacks. This had all the ingredients of a recipe for disaster. Just as predicted, a stray shot went towards the direction of the helpless police officers and threatened to blow them to bits. The 5 common humans could do nothing but just stare impotently at the beam of energy that would without a doubt end all of their lives with a fiery conflagration and simply resigned themselves to their fate. Of course, with Pan being the direct descendant of the greatest heroes in the universe, couldn't allow innocent bystanders to get killed during one of her fights. Her family had taught her better than that. So she, almost immediately, appeared standing right in front of the exposed police officers in the ground and swatted the energy projectile aside with a swing of her arm, the beam ending up impacting on the other side of the street with a loud explosion. Lin's sights practically honed in the direction of the alien girl at seeing her unharmed after her last barrage, only for her to launch another volley of energy blasts as to not suffer the humiliation of having all of her attacks being for nothing. Pan just took a look at the incoming rain of death and turned her neck to glance at the utterly terrified police officers. "Brace yourselves," was all she managed to say before the overwhelming wave of projectiles smashed upon her and she found herself completely focused in deflecting every single one of the energy blasts instead of blocking, knowing that if she were to miss even one, the protectors of the law behind her were sure to be dead. For the next few moments a stream of projectiles tried to strike the alien girl without her moving from her spot while she sent every single of the energy blasts away from her as her arms blurred in a frenzy of motion, causing another stream of explosions that brought untold mayhem everywhere but behind the Saiyan teen, which is exactly what she intended. The continual deflections of her attacks did nothing but infuriate the white-clad goddess even more and made her redouble her efforts in trying to blast the alien girl into oblivion. Pan knew she had to drive Lind away from here before someone got killed. With that thought in mind, she punched one of the incoming projectiles instead of just simply slapping it aside, making sure it was in an angle that allowed it to bounce back towards the blue-haired goddess, who was forced to stop her assault and brace herself against the ball of energy that detonated against her, giving Pan a couple of precious seconds to put her plan into action. "Close your eyes. Now," She yelled towards the paralyzed police officers that were still huddled together in the ground. The quintet of cops didn't waste any time to do as they were told, knowing that following the orders of the alien girl was their only chance of getting out of here alive. Seeing them following her instructions, Pan turned just in time to see Lind lowering her defenses after shrugging off her own energy blast, prompting the alien girl to bring both of her open and stretched hands up to the sides of her eyes. Taiyoken, she yelled before releasing a piercing blinding flash that washed all of their surroundings with a white eyesore light for a moment, leaving the blue-haired goddess and her angels without the capacity to use their sight temporarily. Lind bringing her hands to her eyes in pain due to the visual overload on her senses. Pan just smirked, seeing her tactic had been successful. "Let's take this back to the skies," she said before blasting towards Lind and smashing into her in full. Pan then proceeded to fly away from the city and back into the sea as she dragged the blue-haired goddess and her angels along. Once both overpowered females were gone, the group of policemen did dare to open their eyes and get up from the ground. "Is it over?" said a trembling Hayato as he shivered in a fetal position in the walkway while covering both of his eyes with his hands and peeking through the slits of his fingers. "Yes, they're gone. I can't believe we are alive," said a totally stunned Ryotsu as he simply lay in the cold broken pavement completely flabbergasted. Around him, his fellow co-workers were too, dealing with their own reactions of almost getting killed only to miraculously having made it out alive from that unbelievable destruction thanks to the efforts of the alien girl from another world. Meanwhile, as both combatants found themselves back high above the waters of Tokyo Bay, the cp10 simply blasted the other woman away from her. Lind quickly stopped her motion in cold and straightened herself in midair before she shot back towards her opponent. Both opponents clashed again and began to beat the tar out of each other once more. This time there seemed to be a twinge of desperation mixed with frustration on Lind's movements, as her attacks started to become quite vicious while she just tossed punches all around without stopping. As Lind wasn't human, she didn't get tired the same way humans did, so she could keep tossing punches for a long while once she started to call upon her goddess power. More so since she was the high commander of the Valkyries and her martial and military training was quite extensive. So with that said, the beads of sweat that began to fall from her brow were not caused due to any feeling of exhaustion. No, it was simply her mind about to snap. A powerful punch to her face that sent the goddess backwards and bloodied her lip was what made Lind lose the last vestiges of her patience, well, that and the subsequent pummeling she received at the hands of Pan. A flurry of punches followed by a couple of knees to the stomach and finalized with an epic headbutt that shook the entire skies over Tokyo. Lind immediately retaliated by driving her knee into Pan's chin in order to push the alien girl away from her for a moment. "How come you are still standing? Why don't you go down already, goddammit? I'll defeat you even if I have to unseal all of my power to do it," the goddess said before flaring her power again. Both of Lind's angels began to exude an aura of power, their eyes glowing, before they went back inside their host's body and transformed themselves into giant wings that stretched widely behind the goddess' back. A sign that she was foregoing the use of spells in exchange for sheer raw power as she finally decided to cut all of her mental restraints and bring the whole might of her magical energy into the physical world. With a scream, Lind released the mother of all earthquakes as her rising power began to make the earth to tremble on several kilometers all around her. Black clouds forming and covering the skies in darkness once more. The people down in the Japanese capital began to feel as if the ground was about to open and swallow them all up at any moment. Indeed, it seemed as if the entire world was about to be shattered apart by the power flaring from the goddess. The whole planet was able to feel the earthquake product of Lind's rising might, and every single person watching the live feed knew that the proverbial shit had just hit the fan. Luckily, the tremor didn't lasted more than a few seconds, but by the end of it, Lind was practically glittering due to all of the magical energy she had materialized from her true mana reserves that she had as a goddess, and up to this point sealed by the programs and subroutines of the divine supercomputer Yggdrasil. "Now fall and stay down," Lind declared, exuding a flaming aura, her eyes simmering with power, before she practically materialized in front of Pan in a burst of speed and sinked her fist right in the middle of Pan's stomach. The eyes of the alien girl widened in pain as she rected a wad of saliva from her mouth. That punch had actually managed to hurt her. It seemed Lind had finally reached a level where her attacks were able to injure the cp10. Now this brought a surge of excitement to appear at the back of Pan's mind. Finally, someone who could be a challenge, someone who could endure the power of the first Super Saiyan state. Pan couldn't help but smirk despite the pain inflicted on her. Her small reverie was interrupted by a left hook smashing into her face and sending her several hundred miles over the Pacific. Pan simply let her power flare as she righted herself up and went back straight for Lind. The goddess welcomed her with a knee crashing into her nose. Now it seemed, was Lind's turn to lay down the smackdown and started pummeling Pan with a flurry of strikes beyond the capacity of any mortal to see. The alien girl actually felt herself falter for a moment, such was the strength behind Lind's punches. But she stood her ground and replied with a thunderous uppercut that shook all of the goddess' senses before following up with a kick to the side of Lind's head that sent the winged woman plummeting into the sea. However, the white-clad goddess wasn't able to reach the water as she was intercepted by the alien girl with another kick and sent her back into the sky. Lind immediately recovered in midair and glared at her opponent with burning hatred. "Just die already," she exclaimed as she began to flare more of her power, making the entire earth to tremble again, and launched herself towards her opponent. Pan, for the first time in the battle, found herself hard-pressed to keep up with the blue-haired goddess. No, she knew she was outmatched. Lind's attacks were breaking through her defenses and landing direct hits into her that she most definitively could feel, if the blood spewing from her mouth was any indication. It seemed that the power summoned by the winged woman had finally managed to surpass that of her Super Saiyan state. The alien girl began to seriously consider the fact she'll have to make use of the second stage in order to face Lind's full might. She was actually pretty ecstatic about the notion. The problem was that she doubted that this planet would be able to withstand such vast display of power. Pan knew that the Earth would only be able to keep itself together for a few minutes against the unrestrained power of both women. She couldn't allow the destruction of this world coming to pass, especially after telling that other goddess Belldandy that she would be able to fight against Lind without endangering the sake of the planet. But it really seemed she would have to use her second stage if she wished to be able to defeat her opponent. She still hadn't been able to completely master the ability of suppressing the destructive effects of her power during the second state, since she rarely makes use of it outside sparring with her Saiyan relatives, much less the third. Only first stage has been fully mastered, and that was when she was still a child. She really had let up on her training lately. Anyway, Pan figured that as long as she keeps things close and personal, she doesn't expect any complication to arise, though she wonders how the rest of the gods on this planet will take to one of their own unleashing her full might upon Earth. But no matter, such small considerations were of no concern for a Saiyan. Wham! A loud impact signaled the sudden displacement of air caused by Pan stopping a punch from the white-clad goddess in cold that put an end to the beating she was receiving, managing to keep the winged woman at bay as she pressed against the alien girl with all of her strength and failed, earning a look of utter surprise from Lind. "You know, I really must congratulate you." Pan began to speak calmly despite her messed up state. "You have proven yourself a worthy opponent. Who would have thought I would find someone in this backwater planet strong enough for me to consider taking her seriously, and even more so, making me unleash the second stage of my true strength. Congratulations, for you have earned the right of facing the next level," the alien girl declared as she prepared to raise her power to their true heights. In the mind of Lind and practically everyone watching the live feed, they could only wonder in stunned shock at the words uttered by the alien girl. "The next level. Ha!" Pan yelled out before everything turned white. Back on the desolated construction field, just as Pan had predicted, the gods of this earth were not going just to sit idly and let one of their own destroy the world. "Come on, let's go, word. We have to stop Lind before she destroys Earth," Belldandy exclaimed as she signaled her elder sister to follow after sensing the overwhelming magical energy being displayed by Lind. Her kind of boyfriend Keiichi was startled by that declaration and grabbed the brunette goddess by the arm to keep her from running head-on into trouble. Whoa, wait a minute, Belle, you can't interfere with this battle. If you do, then most surely Pan will hurt you for getting in the way, and then I too will have to risk my life, since I'm sure as hell will not be left behind while you do something incredibly dangerous, and because I gave my word to Pan that you would not interfere in this fight no matter what," the young mechanic said as he tried the best he could to keep the goddess from flying away the most gently he could. "But Keiichi, we have to stop them. Lind is starting to use all of her power. The Earth will not be able to withstand such force. She's about to destroy the world the same way my older sister almost did," she said with utter desperation in her voice. Who was approaching her kindest sister and her paramour while carrying Skuld, was pretty startled by that declaration. "Whoa, Belldandy, time out. You know I was being controlled by the Lord of Terror on that occasion because of Mara, so don't try to put the blame on me for that stunt because it was not my fault," the white-haired goddess said, trying not to remember and leave such shameful episode of her life behind. Her sister Skuld just stared at her with a flat look, knowing that was trying again to disassociate herself of all responsibility just like every time when things go down the drain. Simply ignored her little sister and kept speaking. "Anyway, Belldandy, maybe you should heed Keiichi's advice and stay out of this. We would not be able to stop either Lind or Pan at this point without taking our limiters and releasing our full powers ourselves, and if we do that the Earth gets destroyed anyway. Besides, their battle has moved away far towards the sea. I doubt if we were to move right now we would be able to reach them in time. As much as it pains me, we can do nothing but trust in Pan's word that she will not allow her fight to destroy the world," the gorgeous bronze-skinned woman stated with a sigh. Keiichi was surprised by her statement. "You have that much faith in Pan? I thought you didn't like her very much." "I certainly do not like her after she tried to attack me and my sisters. But I know Saiyans have great hidden wells of inner power that they can call upon when needed, so if there is someone who can match Lind right now and stop her from destroying the Wordle it's her. Besides, her family is known for protecting the planet where they live through battles like this. So it's safe to assume she knows what she's doing and will make sure to keep the end of her bargain with." Snapped a little testily before simmering down and start hacking things on stride. "We were supposed to have come here to stop the existence of the gods from being made public and we failed. Might as well let those two have their fight." The child goddess in her arms simply had things to say about that idea. "What in the name of Kami-sama are you saying, no baka? We can't leave things as they are right now. It was your idea in the first place that we had to come here and intervene," the little girl said as she began to yell a string of curses and insults at where she put in doubt the mental capabilities of her elder sister. The white-haired goddess just stood there in her place with a plain face before she brought her arms down and let her youngest sibling that she was carrying plop on the ground with a squeak. Belldandy was about to intervene in the little spat between her sisters, when suddenly a bright blinding light from the direction of the sea began to illuminate their entire surroundings. Many from the fighters among Pan followers suddenly fell to the ground and began to trash and squirm as if they were having a fit. The three goddesses and human companions stopped all actions in cold and turned to stare at the direction of the light. "You know, I think you were right," Keiichi said as he looked at the ominous light seemed to be getting brighter and brighter with each passing second. Throughout the world, all of the people who had the ability to sense ki went straight to the ground as every single one of them were able to feel the monstrous power of the alien girl, her ki being so vast and enormous as to be able to be easily felt on all of Earth no matter the location or distance. In Kanto, all of the masters and students able to feel ki were left squirming on the ground, their senses being overloaded by the tremendous power being released by Pan. This ki, it is monstrous. I can't." Kenichi wasn't even able to speak due to the overwhelming presence crashing upon him. All he could do was trash about and hope the terrible power would pass soon. His sister completely worried seeing his beloved brother and the masters spasming on the ground. Oni-san. In Kawakami City, Momoyo Kawakami was on the floor on all fours as if a terrible presence was threatening to crush her like an insect. Accompanying her on her struggle was her friend and fellow diva, Mayuchi, who looked pretty ill as she trashed about over the carpet while she gripped her sword so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Despite the obvious pain she was in, a deranged grin was plastered on Momoyo's face, thick beads of sweat falling from her brow and drenching her entire face all the way down to her neck. "Oni-san, what's wrong?" Yamato Naoi, the so-called chosen brother of the black-haired beauty, asked in concern as he was in an instant kneeling down at the side of his sister. The reply that came from buxom raven-haired was a dark chuckle. "Yamato, I am so happy. This alien girl, she's wonderful. Never have I felt someone as strong as her. Someone much powerful than I. Just look at me. My body is shivering. Shivering in fear against my will, I can't stop myself. I want to fight her. I want to fight her, so much. Momoyo said as she turned to look at Yamato with a deranged, crazed expression of joy. On the top floor of a skyscraper, the main HQ to a powerful multinational company, inside the luxurious office belonging to the CEO of said company. We found a beautiful but stern-looking long platinum-haired buxom woman with a birthmark in the shape of an X in the middle of her forehead, writhing about with her upper body sprawled all over her desk, as if she were trying to keep herself from falling into the floor from her chair by using her desk as support. Such terrible and monstrous power. It surpasses by far that of Momoyo. No, to compare both would be like trying to compare a small mountain stream with the ocean. Agaya Kuki said as she used all of her strength to resist the overwhelming pressure that Pan's power caused over her senses. Despite the insufferable pain, a small loop-sided smirk came to her face. Very interesting, URK, the attractive silver-haired woman managed to state before having to focus back on struggling against her sensory overload. Back at the battle over the waters of the Pacific, Pan's latest power spike had literally stirred up a storm as the shockwave alone had displaced millions of liters of water in several miles around both combatants. The air displacement was so sudden and violent that the resultant currents were able to match those of a tornado. Lind was forced to brace herself if she wanted to avoid being blown away. As the light died down and powerful whirlwind currents crashed against the violent ocean, the figure of Pan was able to be seen once more. Her hair had become even spikier than what previously thought possible, and now it stood completely upright as a rod. Her muscles seemed to be defined better as one could easily trace their semblance with sight alone, but it was her power aura the one that suffered the most changes. Unlike before where one could see it as a transparent yellow glow that cloaked the entire form of the alien girl. Now it seemed to have increased in thickness and brilliance while also turning quite violent as one could see many sparks of electricity snapping through its entire length which lashed against anything that dared get too close to the alien girl. All in all, Pan really looked much more powerful and intimidating than before. Lind alongside the people around the world could nothing but stare at the Saiyan new look. The alien girl simply took her time to crane her neck with loud pops. Time to play. Let's see how much can you endure against my new transformation. She said, before disappearing in less than a blink and burying her right fist all the way to the forearm into Lind's gut. The blue-haired goddess retched as she doubled over, a look of complete shock on her face, before she was launched more deeply towards the ocean. She was intercepted from behind by Pan sinking her knee into the small of her back and sending her straight back into the air. Pan once more intercepted her opponent in mid-flight with a fist to the face before she began to bring on the pain, totally reversing the position that the two of them had been just moments ago. Now it was Lind's turn to suffer and bleed. As she began to pummel the helpless goddess with a barrage of punches, Lind could clearly feel how each individual punch broke through the enhanced resilience of her skin granted by her mana and damaged her internal organs. Pretty soon, the attractive white-clad winged woman was spewing torrents of blood from her mouth, crimson droplets being sent flying with each hit. Despite receiving the beating of her life, Lind could not help but feel a rising flame burning inside of her. She was a goddess of war, the greatest combat specialist that the armies of heaven possessed. The Valkyries themselves were under her command. Her entire life was dedicated to a single thing, a single thought that always remained all the time in her mind: battle. This fight, this pain, she loved it. To hear the sound of her own bones fracturing, the smell of blood and sweat mixed together in the air, to feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, to fight with all she had against a stronger opponent, to refuse to back down no matter how injured she might be. It has been a long time since she tasted the coppery flavor of her own blood. By Kami-sama, this fight has been all that she had expected it to be. Pan was truly a mighty opponent to overcome. She could really cut loose against her, and yet it would still not be enough to defeat her. It was for that reason alone that she could not simply lay down and admit defeat easily. For she was a goddess of war, and there was no pleasure greater for her than facing an opponent much stronger than her and in the end, against all odds, managed to wrestle an unexpected victory from the jaws of defeat. Her own pride demanded no less. And for that, she would never stop. She would never yield. She would continue standing up again and again until her body lies broken, all of her bones shattered and blood smeared on the floor to the last drop. And even then she would continue to rise until victory finally becomes hers. That is why she must keep fighting. That is why she would release all of her power upon the world, until only one of the two remains standing. With that thought in mind, Lind once more flared her power as punches kept raining down on her, drawing more and more magical energy from her vast reserves to reinforce her body and increase her physical prowess. The blowback of her power spike was enough to give Pan pause in her assault. She was literally burning by the power she was summoning. The earth itself barely seemed to be able to withstand such force, but Lind didn't care and launched herself towards her enemy to be locked in combat once more. Sadly for the blue-haired goddess, there were those who considered her display of power would endanger the world and were already taking steps to stop her. Up in the Yggdrasil control room, Pirth was instructing her decisive orders to the goddess under her command. That's it. This has gone for far too long already. Cut Lind's connection with the Yggdrasil and lock her out of the system. We cannot allow her to unleash her full power and destroy the world, the brunette goddess said in a tone of finality, making it quite clear there was no room for disagreement. But, Chrono tried to reply back, but a look from Pirth made her to shut up. Right, cutting connection now. All three goddesses then proceeded to carry out their orders and typed the appropriate commands on their workstations. It didn't take long for the lead Valkyrie on Earth to feel the results of such actions. As Lind exchanged punches with Pan, she suddenly felt as if struck by lightning, her body freezing up and the stream of mana she was channelizing coming to a stop. She could do nothing but curse in surprise at this new development. What? No, I'm losing my power. I can feel my connection with the Yggdrasil being severed. This must be Pirth's doing. She's cutting me out of the system. The white-clad goddess thought in alarm and rage when she realized what was going on. Her opponent took notice of her distraction and capitalized on it, landing a punch on Lind's face and sending her flying into the horizon. The winged woman simply cursed to her innards again and flapped her wings with a single action to stop her motion in cold. She refused to be defeated because of the meddling of her fellow goddesses. No, I will not allow my victory to be taken away from me like this. Curse you, Pirth. You will not get in the way of my battle. She yelled, letting her two angels out again, who began to frantically work on making sure their mistress didn't get cut off from the Yggdrasil and thus losing all of her power. The goddess in question using all of her anger to resist the actions of her fellow goddesses. Her yells resonated throughout the ocean. Up there, back in heaven, the goddesses in the control room soon found their efforts of disconnecting Lind being thwarted. Pirth. Lind is resisting being cutting off from the system. She is using her angels to countermand our commands. X said in sudden alarm as she typed furiously on her hollow terminal. What? Cut off all access and block all routes. Reboot the system if necessary. We cannot allow her to keep drawing power through the Yggdrasil. Pirth called back as she too began to use her privileges of administrator to try to block Lind's access to the supercomputer. On Earth, Lind soon found her newest defiance being pushed back steadily despite her best efforts. Cammy, damn you, Pirth. You will not get in my way. The white-clad goddess declared with a roar as she kept resisting the attempts of her fellow goddess to lock her power. This how Pan found Lind as she flew in the scene looking to continue her fight with the goddess. Obviously she was a little caught off guard by the BlueNet actions. What is the matter? Why are you stopping? Is something keeping you from fighting? She said, raising an eyebrow in puzzlement. The white-clad goddess ignored the words of her opponent, too engrossed on her informatic battle to pay any attention to anything else, but as soon as she laid her eyes on Pan, she remembered there was still another battle to fight. Knowing that having Pirth sabotaging her performance would certainly cost her the victory, as she could not face two opponents at the same time through different approaches, she came to a decision. If I am to be taken down by treason, then at least I'm going to make sure you go down with me. The white-clad goddess said before she cupped both of her hands over her head and began to focus all of her energy into an orb as she rose over in altitude until she was far up in the air and looking down on Pan. Her actions brought even more distress to the goddess Mani, womaning the Yggdrasil control room. Shit, Pirth. Lind is focusing all of the energy she already has into a single attack and is diverting all the mana she can from her limited connection with the Yggdrasil into it. One of the bridge bunnies exclaimed towards her scantily dressed superior. Obviously those news didn't thrill the brunette-haired goddess of love. Damn it. No. This is bad. This is really, really bad. Even with her connection to the Yggdrasil being blocked as it is, the energy she already has is more than enough to destroy Earth several times over if focused in a single point. Pierth exclaimed as her hands blurred in an alarmed desperate frenzy over her hollow terminal, trying to find a way to stop the goddess of war from destroying the world. As the brunette goddess and her 3 underlings were focused playing interference, Lynn poured all of the magical energy she had collected thus far into the orb cupped between her hands. The very high concentration of mana caused the energy orb to start glowing like a beacon, an ocean blue sphere that seemed to be made of flowing streams of water that it showered all of its surroundings in a blinding torrent of light, overcoming all other sources of illumination completely, even the light of the sun, practically making it the only thing worth to be seen in that whole hemisphere of Earth. Not only that, but as more and more mana was being poured into it, the orb began to increase in size more and more. It kept growing at a steady pace until it was at least 20 times bigger than its original size, and it just kept growing even more after that. Due Lin's altitude and the high focus of heavily condensed mana, the light of the orb was able to reach all the way back to Japan. Through the entire country the helpless population was able to witness the ominous light, for it didn't give them much of a sense of confidence to stare at that light shining from the heavens that was able to eclipse all other sources of illumination even from hundreds of miles away into the ocean. The ominous bright light reached Kanto, making the gathered student armies, and the small gang of girls hiding on a nearby rooftop, to pause in watching the live feed and turn in the direction of the light. The sight of a second sun far away at the distance began to fill them all with a sense of dread. None of them uttered a word at what they were witnessing. They just stood there gaping gobsmacked at the increasingly bright light. Kenichi didn't say anything and just simply brought both Mew and his sister towards himself and hugged them. Both girls returned the hug without speaking to, as they tried to find comfort in the arms of a loved one against the overwhelming terror they were feeling. In Kawakami City, the Kazama family turned to stare in fear at the piercing light that entered through one of the windows in the room and felt a horrible chill running through all of their spines. Even Momoyo was shaking in fear at the notion of the monstrous power that could be able to cause such feat, and she was smiling with a face-splitting grin because of it. Agaya Kuki too stared at the light that filtered through the windows of her office, cold sweat falling from her temple all the way down to her neck. Both Natsumi and Miyuki didn't say a thing as they stared at the light shining more and more brightly from far beyond Tokyo Bay. Their hands, hanging limply at their sides, unconsciously moved and clutched each other tightly. In Shibuya, the trio of gals standing in the middle of the devastated square simply stared up at the sky as the light covered all of their vision. Both Miyu and Aya felt like faltering, but their best friend, the self-declared super gal, put her hands on their shoulders in reassurance. Both terrified girls turned immediately towards their friend, and despite the dreadful situation they found themselves in, they couldn't help but find themselves at ease at Ran's calm expression. "It's all right, everything will be fine. I'm confident Pan will be able to deal with this without trouble," she said, smiling to her friends. "How can you be so sure of that, Ran?" Aya asked, still with a little apprehension in her voice, despite the reassuring presence of her friend. Ran just gave her a thumb up and a grin as response. "Anyone who saves the life of the super gal must be pretty awesome herself, and that is more than enough reason for me to have my entire confidence on her." Usually Ran's simplistic views on life could be pretty silly, but it was in moments like this when the orange-haired gal proved herself an unwavering support for her friends, as her upbeat attitude could prove contagious and lift the spirits of those nearby. Aya couldn't help but giggle at her friend's antics and gave her a nod in acknowledgement. On Narima, in the courtyard of the Tendo Dojo, the Tendos and their pseudo-permanent guests just stared helplessly at the sky from which a dreadful bright light seemed to be pulsating from beyond stirred and angered clouds. Most of the people living around these parts may be pretty delusional or unwilling to face reality, but they well knew that whatever was causing that unnatural light could certainly be no good. Even sweet Kasumi felt apprehensive when staring at the light directly. Ranma could feel his resolve falter at the sight of that light, but his pride would not allow him to show weakness in the presence of others, especially the people most close to him. He remained projecting a brave front even if he was pretty unnerved in the inside. He was distracted from his thoughts when he felt Akane taking hold of his hand, A small glance towards his fiancée showed him how much distressed she was at the presence of the light. Knowing the seriousness of the situation, Ranma made no fuss or comment towards Akane for her actions and allowed her to find whatever small amount of comfort she could find on him, resolute more than ever to not show weakness. Ryotsu and his fellow police officers standing over the remains of the Kamari Park police box and still reeling from their close brush with death, simply looked up towards the unnatural light that began to fill all of their visions. They began to feel deep in their guts that the danger was still yet to pass. In fact, most surely, the worst part was yet to come. Mara too was getting a little worried about that orb being charged by Lind as she kept watching from her portable TV. She knew that spell was more than capable of destroying Earth several dozen times over. That was a huge problem, especially since she is living in said planet. Although she is not particularly worried that the blast would kill her or that she would have any trouble to survive the exposure to the cold vacuum without an atmosphere. It would certainly hurt like a bitch. From her seat of power down in Niflheim, Damakaicho Hild was simply smirking devilishly at the images transmitted from Earth. At her side, Hegel was staring with a surprised expression as she had never imagined that a goddess would willingly release that much power as to run the risk of destroying the entire planet. She turned towards her boss with an inquiring gaze. "You seem rather pleased of how things have turned out, my mistress. Were you planning for the Earth to be destroyed?" she asked. The ruler of all hell just gave a half-distracted acknowledgement to her minion. Ah, you misunderstand, my dear Haggle-chan. I do not want the Earth to be destroyed. Never wanted to tell the truth. It would be pretty boring without the humans around. They are quite the entertaining creatures, don't you think? No, I do not wish for the Earth to be destroyed, but all this chaos and mayhem being brought because of this little Saiyan girl certainly brings a happy smile to my face. The Damakaicho said pretty joyfully. But won't that goddess will end up destroying the planet and thus all of your fun if that spell of hers were to hit? I mean, I have never seen a first-class goddess releasing all of that power at once while on Midgar. There's a reason we all have to wear limiters when we go out to the mortal world to fulfill a contract," said the blonde demoness in puzzlement. "Oh, I'm pretty sure Pan is more than capable of dealing with that little issue. You worry too much, my dear Haggle. Just sit back and enjoy the show," Hild said as she got comfy at her leisure on her throne. Back at the construction site, Keiichi could just stare at the growing light with cold fear rising on the back of his neck. He immediately snapped towards Belldandy in alarm. "Go, Belldandy, go," he practically yelled as he relinquished his hold on the goddess. Belldandy wasted no time to fly away as she called her older sister. "Let's go, Erd, quickly," the Norn of the past acknowledged with a stiff nod before flying after her sister. Belldandy then released her angel, which circled around her for a moment before hovering behind her in full display. "Holy Bell, give me speed," the brunette goddess commanded to her angel, who began to chant to filter the magical energy needed to boost Belldandy's capabilities. The Norn of the present began to glow as mana began to concentrate around her, before she blasted towards the horizon at light speeds. Erd didn't stay behind as she too released her own angel. "Let's go, world of elegance." An angel divided exactly by the middle in light and dark colors wrapped herself around Erd before the bronze skin shot into the distance too at the speed of light. Skulk just pouted for having to remain behind due to the lack of any mean of transportation to be able to keep up with her sisters. From their position, the gathered martial artists and followers of the alien girl simply stared, either in total or in most cases, mild surprise. "Wow, they have even more angels. They're pretty cool, isn't it?" said an amazed Whip as she stared after the departing goddesses. She turned to find most of the more hard asses of their company staring at small hollow projection of Pan's battle coming out from Giru's optical sensor. "You guys don't seem much worried about that big ball of energy glowing in the sky, how come?" she asked curiously. It was Nina who answered. "Same as before with the rain of fire." She then motioned towards the projection with a move from her head. "Look at this and tell me what you see." Whip was a little put off by that answer but did what was asked of her. Turning at the projection, she was able to see the blue-haired goddess still pumping a serious amount of energy into her attack, which now looked pretty humongous. Even though it was pretty distressing to see the size of that thing, Whip was able to take notice how Pan seemed pretty nonchalant about it. She was simply floating there, waiting for Lin's attack to be ready with the most unfazed and unpreoccupied expression ever. That certainly caught Whip's attention. Pan doesn't seem in the least worried by the attack being charged by her opponent. She's just standing there with her arms crossed. Whip replied in surprise. Nina simply nodded in confirmation. Indeed, if after all that has happened, Pan doesn't show even the smallest hint of concern against any of her opponent's techniques, then why should we? She said in a matter-of-fact tone. Around the blonde assassin, none of the other fighters disagreed with her words and simply nodded in acknowledgement. Back to the battle above the ocean, Lind had finally ended charging her attack. She had poured every last bit of mana she could into it, both from the stores she had already summoned and from the bits she managed to bring by force despite Pierre's attempts of cutting her from the Yggdrasil. It is ready. This is all I have. Now take it and suffer my most powerful attack, she declared with exhilaration. Pan simply remained staring motionless up at her without blinking. Without further ado, the blue-haired goddess let the massive energy ball fall towards the alien girl with a yell, the immense orb of mana taking a few seconds to gain momentum due to its sheer size. It was in that moment that the two eldest Norn's sisters arrived into the scene. No, that attack cannot be allowed to strike the planet. If it does, then the entire world will be destroyed. Beldandi yelled in despair as she saw Lin's energy ball already on the move. Quickly, Erd, take out your limiter and help me stop it, she ordered to her sister as she brought a hand to the earring on her left ear. Do not even think about interfering. This fight is between me and Lind alone. Pan spoke in a cutting and decisive tone as she kept her entire gaze focused on the giant ball of energy towering over her, not even bothering to glance in the direction of the goddesses as energy began to be drawn and coalesce around her. Beldandi turned towards the alien girl with a complete dumbstruck look. But, don't you know what is at risk in here? Now is not the time for vain pride. If that thing touches the surface of this world, then all life would just cease to exist in an instant, yours included. The brunette yelled as she braced herself against the increasing blowing winds being released by the approaching sphere of energy. Beldandi could simply not understand the stubbornness of the alien girl. Didn't she care that the entire planet would blow up with her in it because of that energy ball? Pan just smirked at that observation. Makes things much more interesting, don't you think? Do not worry about the sake of this planet. As I had said before, I will not allow this world to be destroyed while I am living on it, she said, turning serious again as she began to raise and focus her energy. You have nothing to worry in the least, little goddess, for I am more than capable of dealing with this myself. So sit tight and just watch and learn, the alien girl stated with boundless confidence bordering on arrogance as she stretched her arms forward while cupping her hands together, energy starting to gather between her palms as she concentrated. Beldandi was still not very reassured despite Pan's claims. In fact, she became even more frantic when she took notice of what the alien girl was planning to do. You're going to launch an energy attack against that thing. Stop. If you do that, you will only be setting it off early. It would change nothing. It is too close to Earth. The resultant explosion would still be able to wipe out the entire world. The brunette goddess called in desperation, trying to make Pan see reason and keep her from doing something extremely brash and dangerous. She was about to intervene when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Turning around, Beldandi saw her sister Erd with a serious expression on her face, shaking her head sideways to silently tell her not to interfere. Don't, Beldandi, remember what I told you. Let's just stay back and give Pan a chance before doing anything, okay? The white-haired goddess said as she gently led her sister away from to give some space to the alien girl. Meanwhile, Pan continued focusing her energies. She retracted her extended arms without separating her cupped hands and brought them to her right flank, setting them over her hip as she opened her legs and changed the position of her body until she was facing the direction of the incoming giant energy ball with her left shoulder, her left leg at the front, her right one at the back. From her position hovering above her humongous orb of energy, Lind was able to see that was planning to do something. No matter what you try, you will not be able to stop my attack. Victory is mine, she yelled, trying to get a rise out of her opponent. But Pan simply ignored her and continued to gather energy. An energy ball began to form and glow between the alien girl's cupped hands, Pan simply reinforced her footing by rearing back her hips and stretching her legs even more as she kept focusing her ki. Haim, it's no use. I have poured every last ounce of mana into this attack. To try to face it head on, it is foolish. It will end you. Lind kept yelling, continuing with her verbal harassment as her orb of mana kept descending towards its objective, practically looming all over Pan as it continued with its inexorable trajectory. The alien girl's gaze never wavered as she continued to gather energy, her own energy orb glowing with a pure white light that matched in its intensity Lind's energy ball. The air all around her getting charged heavily with static energy, releasing sudden and violent electric sparks from time to time. The entire world seemed to catch its breath in a single moment, all the people around the world wrapped in tense attention waiting for something to happen as the threat of total extinction hanged over the head of every single living thing on the planet. With a final yell, Pan released her attack. Ha! A blinding pillar of energy burst forth from the alien girl's hands. It soared through the air in a straight line and impacted in full against the enormous orb of magical energy in an instant. The initial clash between the two opposite forces was so tremendous as to release a shockwave massive enough that spread through the entire sky and reached all the way down to the ocean, disturbing the waters for dozens of miles all around. The giant ball of mana and the energy wave pushed violently against each other for several long moments, making the tension of everybody who was watching to rise high, as no one was able to accurately determine the outcome of this match. Both attacks kept pushing against one another for supremacy, their struggle blowing impressive pressures of air on all directions, forcing the nearby witnessing goddesses to guard themselves against the harsh winds. All light been eclipsed by that of the two energy attacks, making all their surroundings to be washed in an all-consuming white. As the seconds kept stretching, eventually a victor started to become apparent as slowly, very slowly, but surely, Lind's enormous energy ball was begging to be pushed back. The blue-haired goddess was simply astonished at that feat. What? Impossible. How are you able to repel my attack? Pan didn't answer and just kept pushing energy into her attack, but it was already pretty evident that she now gained the upper hand. With one last mighty heave, the alien girl completely repelled the giant mana orb and sent it back to its sender. Ha! The entire gigantic energy ball was shot all the way up into the sky. Lind could only stare how her own attack was being blasted back to her for a second, before she snapped out of her stupor with a sudden start and veered away to a side in a burst of speed to completely evade the massive energy ball before she was swept away by it. Despite having cleared the danger just in time, Lind was still sent tumbling away due to her close proximity to such high concentration of energy. The magic sphere kept moving on its way as it broke the stratosphere and lost itself into the confines of space. After a few seconds of still keeping pumping energy into her attack, Pan cut off the feed and the extremely long energy wave simply dissipated into nothing. The entire world just stared, gaping, at what the cp10 had just done. Even the goddesses on her presence were unable to come up with anything to say at what they just witnessed. Pan then suddenly raised a hand up, fully open and with all fingers stretched before she used it to count down backwards. First she brought down her little finger, then her thumb, the ring finger, the middle finger, before finalizing with the index finger. Once her hand was closed into a fist, a massive explosion was suddenly witnessed from the depths of space. The explosion appearing like that of a supernova, covering everything completely in white for a few seconds and blocking all sight on Earth. As everybody was temporarily blinded by the explosion, a slight tremor began to be felt on all the planet, signaling the moment that the shockwave from the detonation had finally reached humanity's homeworld. After the tremor had passed and all sight had finally returned, Pan simply nodded to herself in satisfaction at a job well done. Again, the people around the world simply stared. Erd was about to speak as she raised a finger up despite her stumped expression, when suddenly a feminine roar was heard and Lind suddenly appeared out of nowhere flying towards Pan with her fist pulled back for an attack. The alien girl immediately took notice of her still conscious opponent and replied to the aggression with one of his own. Both women smashed their fists on each other's faces with a powerful impact and an earth-shaking shockwave. After connecting their punches, both opponents simply remained on their positions without making any kind of movement for a few seconds. You fought well. I am glad to have finally found someone on this planet that was able to give me a decent fight. Pan spoke casually despite the fact she had a fist pressing into her cheek. The blue-haired goddess seemed to have been caught by surprise by that statement as she managed to blink in puzzlement despite having a fist sinking into her face. You must be mocking me. Either that, or you're taking pity on me. Both things are insulting to me. As I had said before, when we began this battle of ours, I can tell that you're not using your entire strength against me. Despite all that has happened during our fight, all the power we have unleashed, the destruction we have brought, you are still containing yourself against me. You don't know how shameful, how humiliating it is to me to be defeated without my opponent taking me seriously. All these years that I've spent as a goddess of war, training and honing my abilities, learning all the martial styles known on Earth and serving in the Valkyries until I became the commander-in-chief. All those years going to waste, their meaning lost and forgotten, if in the end all my hard-earned skills failed me when it mattered the most, if I can't make my opponent consider me a threat, no matter who it might be, then how can I call myself a goddess of war and martial skill? Lynn said with a hint of despair in her voice, her eyes filling and brimming with unshed tears. You're wrong, Pan replied at once. I do take you seriously and consider you a formidable warrior. Those of us Saiyans who have managed to unlock the Super Saiyan state do not even think of using it in battle unless we take our enemies seriously. Not only did you manage to battle against me on the first Super Saiyan state, but you forced me to enter in the second stage in order to defeat you. Only the most powerful of opponents have forced us to go beyond the first state. So yes, Lind, I do consider you to be a powerful opponent, and I'm happy that I was able to find someone on this planet who I could fight against without worry and cutting loose a little. We had a great fight, the Saiyan team declared with utmost seriousness. And besides, I don't know what you are complaining about. I'm not the only one who didn't show the 100% of her potential. She added with a knowing smile. The corner of Lind's mouth twitched upwards in a half smile at those words. You're right, not my intention, I assure you. Some of my kind got in the way and kept me from unleashing my full power, the blue-haired goddess said. She trailed a little, her eyes growing unfocused. It seemed Lind's consciousness was slipping the longer their conversation stretched. Pan's eyes turned to stare in the direction of Erd and Beldandy, the other two goddesses that were present floating several yards away at a discreet distance. Lind realized what the alien girl must have been thinking, so she elaborated. Not them, others of my kind, the ones who are in charge of making sure no rogue goddesses can release their power on Earth. Regardless, I thank you for your words, it was indeed a good battle. Despite the fact that you attacked and hurt my friends, I really enjoyed our fight very much. It was all I expected it to be. You are indeed a true warrior. I only wish we had been able to fight at our fullest capabilities. This planet is just too frail to do that. People tends to get nervous about it and then they start to get in the way. I would wish to have the opportunity to fight against you in the future, this time with no interruptions, just you and I going at it with our full might. Lind stated as she flickered in and out of consciousness. She was really having a hard time to remain standing. Pan just nodded in respect. One day we will fight again, and there would be no more restrictions between us. We will fight with our fullest even if the planet we are standing upon gets destroyed in the process. I'm sure I can find one no one would mind much if we blow it up. That I promise, she said seriously, before her demeanor changed and turned rather embarrassed. And, sorry for having attacked your friends. I hadn't the slightest intention of hurting them, I just needed them out the way, it's just that I really wanted to fight you. The alien girl confessed a bit lamely. Lind just smirked at her honesty. I can relate, it's the same with me. Thank you, I'll look forward to our next match. The white-clad goddess said before her eyes rolled to the back of her head and she toppled forward. Pan easily catched her and supported her weight on her shoulders, the battle finally coming to a close, with the alien girl being the clear victor. Me too, Lind vs Pan. Pan wins KO. The alien girl simply remained there supporting her unconscious opponent, her expression one of deep thought as she turned off her super state. The aura of power she was emanating dissipated and her hair turned back to her normal color. Beldandy and Erd floated towards her at a sedate pace. Pan simply acknowledged with an undecipherable look. Told you I could deal with Lind pretty well on my own. You two got worried over nothing. She said dismissively. Erd just huffed in response. Right, because a rain of fire that almost destroys Tokyo and the whole planet being pretty close to total annihilation is supposed to be nothing. She snarked sarcastically as she crossed her arms and gave Pan a look. The Saiyan teen simply shrugged uncaringly in response. Well, there were some minor complications, but I took care of them all personally. My family is pretty used on dealing with stuff like this with such regularity, that unless entire planets are destroyed, then it cannot begin to be considered an issue. And even things like that can be fixed. So sue me if you don't like my methods, was all she said to the bronze-skinned goddess. Belldandy then interjected. You were true to your word and kept your battle with Lind from destroying the Earth. However, you brought about untold damage upon Tokyo and endangered the lives of millions for your own selfish desires. Was it worth it? The usually kind goddess said with the sternest glare she could muster. It really made Belldandy seem pretty terrifying despite her kind nature. Even Pan was having trouble of not quailing under that stare. That is because she knew that expression pretty well. It is the stare that her mother, her grandmother and her aunt give her to tell her she's in a great deal of trouble and she better have a damn good explanation at the ready. You know that kind of stare that moms give you to make you feel like shit, yeah, that one. Pan had to let out a long and tired mental sigh at Belldandy's expression. Goddamn, she is a teenager able to make entire planets go boom, yet she is unable to resist the angry glare from an irritated mom type. That's bullshit. Ah, alright, I'm sorry, I'll take care of fixing the mess I did. Okay, Pan said grudgingly, flinching under the stare of the brunette goddess. Just stop staring me like that. Belldandy's mood immediately did a 360 as a smile returned to her face, pleased with that answer. Thank you. Right, sorry for the whole knocking you out and attacking your sisters. It was a spurt of the moment thing. I really don't have anything against you or your sisters. I only wanted to fight Lind without anyone getting in the way. The alien girl said somewhat apologetically. Belldandy just listened and nodded in acknowledgement. Anyway, we should probably get back, she advised. Very well. The brunette goddess agreed and tried to approach Pan to take the unconscious Lind from her. The Saiyan teen stepped back, more like floated, however, not willing to relinquish her hold on the blue-haired goddess. I'll take care of carrying Lind back, if you don't mind, she said a little bit too protectively. Belldandy just smiled pleasantly and nodded, before the two goddesses and alien girl began to fly back to the desolated construction site. Pan set foot back on the ground right in front of her followers, still carrying the unconscious blue-haired goddess with her. Okay, I think we're finally done for today, she said with an impish smile. Anyone have some last thing to say? Whip raised up her hand. Yes, Whip, what about all the destruction caused to the city? Are we going to be dealing with that now? She said, really wondering if Pan was really going to fulfill her word and fix all her damage herself, or will put her and the rest of her followers to do it in her stead. That can wait for tomorrow. First we have to go back to our headquarters to heal our wounds and get some rest. She took a moment to appraise the condition of the remaining fighters, apprentices and grandmasters. Yup, that is certain the first thing we need to address. Then tomorrow at first hour we'll deal with the reconstruction of the city. I think this a good opportunity for some of my special brand of training. I think I'll put the kids to give me a hand with it once they return from Kanto. They should already be done fighting all the schools of that region by now. Alright, anything else? She inquired. You look pretty happy after having fought that goddess you're carrying, mistress, Foxy pointed up. Pan beamed a happy smile after hearing that. Hell yeah, this was exactly the kind of fight I was wishing for. Lind really gave me a nice spar. I think I just made new friend, she said rather chirpy. Many of the fighters in front of her just stared. Spar? You mean tossing punches that create earthquakes, causing havoc in a metropolis and almost destroying the whole planet was simply a spar to you? Whip asked in disbelief. Well, yeah, this was nothing more than a nice warm-up for me. Just look at me, after all that has happened I'm not even winded yet. I'm still pretty ready to keep going on if someone still wants to mess with me right now. I told you all before, my race is one of violent supermen. Among my family these types of battles are a pretty common thing. In fact, we don't even consider it a battle unless a planet or two get blown up. The alien girl answered pretty unfazed. All the people who heard her just gaped. Mills Lane suddenly appeared after spending all this time hiding inside a ditch ever since Lind appeared, meteor smashing the field. You all people are the craziest bastards I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. Damn it. You almost got the entire people of this city killed because of your crap. I'm done in here. Just get me back home away from all of you insane martial artists, ridiculously powerful alien girls and violent goddesses able to destroy planets. This has been a shitty day, alright, the elder referee said in a tired tone with a shake of his head. Pan just nodded at him. Alright, sounds fair. I'm sure that whatever is left of Yami can more than enough be able to shoulder the expenses of your return back home. She turned towards Kushinada. You should put someone from what's left of your organization to take care of this, she then addressed everyone one last time. So, does someone want to tell me something I don't already know? This time it was Mature who raised a delicate hand. Yes, Mature, Pan asked to the blonde bombshell. Well, me and Vice have a confession to make. The buxom woman said as she nervously rubbed the back of her neck. If this about you two being former spies for Gonitz and the Hakushu clan, I already knew about that, Pan simply stated plainly. Mature could all but gape in surprise at the reply of the alien girl. What? When? How did you learn about that? Pan just huffed in annoyance and gestured towards Giru. Giru can read minds, remember. I explained this to all of you the first day I recruited you. Don't tell me you forgot, she said with a plain stare. Mature just coughed to hide her embarrassment and change the direction of the conversation. So, you don't mind if we work for you despite our previous ties with an organization that could certainly become an enemy to you in the near future? Pan simply shook her head sideways in a negative. Nah, despite you having been spies working for someone else, Giru also told me that you don't care very much about either Gonitz or the Hakushu, and if it had been up to you in the first place you wouldn't have accepted working for them. He also told me how you decided to do the smart thing and cut all ties with them to serve me exclusively. So yeah, as long as you remember who's boss, I'll have no trouble of having you two serving me, and besides, after what all of you have seen today, do you really think Gonitz or the Hakushu clan could prove any kind of danger against me? The alien girl explained nonchalantly. Oh, okay, sounds fair, no complaint from us, the blonde bombshell said in agreement. Alright, if that is all then let us get moving already. I have to heal the lot of you, I have to take care of Lind here until she wakes up. She said, gesturing to the unconscious goddess she was supporting. I have to also heal and appease these other goddesses behind me before they start to look at me ugly again. She pointed at the Norn sisters behind her. There are still many things I need to do, so we better get to it, she said before she began to walk back to the headquarters of the Shinpaku Alliance. Her followers and the rest of martial artists just followed her without complaint, the three goddesses and Keiichi trailing behind them. Giru finally cut off the live feed, signaling the end of the show and making the people of the world to get back to their lives and ponder on the events that were witnessed today. Certainly planet Earth would never be the same after today. Ch 19.